Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iturrate, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy.
The Lights Out Podcast. We are back. I'm Miguel Iturrate. That's the MMA detective, Mike Davis, and we are lining up another one of our deep dive interviews. We got a legend this time, Mark Coleman, the first UFC Heavyweight Champion, won UFC tournaments 10 and 11, won the Pride Grand Prix, all before the year 2001, all before Zuffa. In the 90s, this is probably the baddest man on the planet. Mark Coleman's joining us. I'm excited.
All right, so this, I believe, Basrut was our first world champion, technically speaking. This is our second. So, we're 61 episodes in, 62 episodes in, and we've got our second world champion. I'm at an unfair advantage in this interview because I know Mark real well. So we're going to kind of go through the closet on this one. There's going to be a lot of information that gets put into this interview that you're not going to be able to find unless you spend a considerable amount of time with them. Please like, share, subscribe. Fantastic growth. Dude, we're jumping literally every episode. There's a noticeable jump. Guys, thank you so much. Please continue to do that. The only way we can continue doing this is if we know someone's listening. So with that, Miguel, why don't you take us out?
We are heading into our deep dive with the Godfather of Ground and Pound.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us once again. We have a deep dive time, our favorite part. And man, I'm excited about this one. A lot of times you get people in here. We got a Hall of Famer right now, somebody Hall of Fame. But I remember at one point when I was early into my career, watching guys like this and said, who's ever going to beat them? Who's ever going to beat a guy like that? You got a wrestler who you can't submit. Who's ever going to beat him? I remember that was a talk for a lot of us were talking about that. I don't know how you're going to beat a guy like this. It was unbelievable. So I got so much to say right now. We're just going to get it going. Mark Coleman. Mark, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing real good. Thank you. Better than ever. Very much.
I like to hear, man.
So real fast. So, Chris, I'm just as emotional as Chris over this interview. I'm so psyched about it because what we're talking about here is the Hammer, right? But the Godfather of Ground and Pound too. That is amazing. We are talking about really, really one of the forefathers, a Mount Rushmore of MMA level dude. And I mean that not just because I know the guy, but because there's nobody else like Mark Coleman. There's nobody else like Mark Coleman. Thank you for joining us, man.
Yeah, thank you. It's very kind. That means a lot to me hearing that from you.
Well, I appreciate that, Mark, too. And Mike, Mike, and I know Mike knows you. And, one of the things we've been trying to get here is get, behind the scenes stuff. So I'm going to let Mike take it away.
Okay, so in regards to history, Mark has got a significant part, but his fighting prowess started much before the UFC. So Mark, you and I spent quite a bit of time together driving around Ohio when I was doing sales. And you told me about one fight in particular that you would like to run back. Not that you lost, but you just like another crack at it.
Well, he's dead, so we ain't getting our run back. So
could you walk us through it though?
Hey, it was very important to me when growing up to be the toughest guy in the world. I wanted to be the baddest man on the planet because I didn't like nobody looking at me wrong. I didn't want nobody picking on me. So I started training very young age. 5 years old, I already knew what I wanted to be. A pro athlete. There was no MMA, but I still wanted to be the best man on the planet, no doubt about it. I didn't get into too many scraps because I convinced the other guy many times that he's in a lot of trouble. So I won most of my fights without even having to throw a punch. And I did throw punches. I didn't use ground and pound in fights because I did sometimes, but when there was more than one, and there was a lot of times there was more than one, you got to stick and move, man. So when I had to stick and move, I could. I did. I'm undefeated on the streets, just like my daddy.
So I had been told a story by yourself from a a scrap on the street that started at, I think it's like is it the Fremont Fair, the county fair?
Fremont Fairgrounds. It's a pretty famous story. I'm not happy about it, but I mean, I got a lot of people who gave me a loss on it. Maybe I had a lot of I took mount on the damn guy, but I didn't punch him because I was getting ready for the Olympics and I was worried about my reputation. So I let him off pretty easy. But in the books, it went down as a loss in my hometown because this guy, he spread the story before I did, and the whole town had heard about it by the time I got up the next day. And according to those people, I took a loss, and man, it ate me alive for years. I actually went back looking for the guy 2 years later. I went back to the fairgrounds where it had happened, and he wasn't there, but his wife and the other people they run the parties. They run the parties at the fairgrounds, and his wife and her friends came out with some sticks and some logs, and then the cops came, and I usually shut up when the cops come, but this had been eating me up for 2 years, and I wanted paybacks, and I didn't shut up with the cops. I was very, very lucky that I played baseball with the chief of police's son, because yeah, he let me off. I should have been handcuffed that night.
So let's start it from the beginning. You're at the county fair. You know, it's a big, to do for your city, and you're drinking a little bit, and
quite a bit. Had probably a half gallon of black velvet in my hand.
Okay, so you run into somebody working security, and you had explained to me that there was a confrontation. He asked you to leave, and you said you don't think so. Am I correct?
Well, this guy it was his camper, and that's where the party was being thrown. And there was probably a lot of jealousy in what I had been done in my life over time. His height, he was like probably 45 at the time, 6'4", probably 270. And he had ran me off the party a few years in a row because I don't know, he just didn't like me. I have no idea why. I'm very likable, but this time it's right around 1 o'clock. Party's over. There's 300 people there, and all of a sudden I hear him look at me and said, "I thought I told you it's time to go home." Well, why not? Why in the fuck's he telling me this? There's 300 people there. Why is he telling me? And I looked at my buddy and he said, "Come on, Mark, let's go. We don't need any trouble." And I just said, "Well, maybe I do." And that guy heard me say it, read my lips, and he gave me I wasn't ready. I ain't going to deny it was my fault, but he gave me a 2-hand chuck. And
like a football push,
two-hand offensive lineman chuck, and I wasn't ready, and knocked me clean out of my shoes. That's when you wore shoes without tying them back then. So he knocked me clean out of my shoes, and he's following it up. And then I tripped over one of the tents that has the rope down the side. So I tripped over that, and I pulled him right on top of me. So that's how people kind of assumed he won the fight, because he did take me down. He ended up on top of me, but I quickly swiveled my hips as the wrestler I was, and I ended up on top of him, and I threw about 5 punches. I'm not gonna lie, I threw 5 punches, but they all missed. They all fucking missed. But
he was shrimping.
Then I heard a bunch of people yelling, "Get off him, Mark! Get off him!" And I was worried about my reputation and my image, and I'm going to the Olympics here soon. So I got up off this son of a bitch, and he stood right up, and then he got in my face again. He had 2 hands around my throat, and I had 1 hand around his throat. I'm holding him off. And then he got too many people with him. He had about 6 or 7 buddies with him, and they're shoving me back. And once again, I tripped over another rope and he lands on top of me a second time. So I could see how people, this ain't a wrestling match. He might have got 2 points, but no punches thrown. I swiveled my hips. I got back on top of him. And that's when the cops were there. And so I kind of, whenever the cops showed up, I kind of didn't want to go to jail, so I got up off him again. And then I started getting angry because I realized this guy started the whole fucking thing. And so I threw one punch standing up as we were kind of separated a little bit. I threw a punch. I cut him underneath the eye to secure the victory, in my opinion. I secured the victory right there. And then everybody just went their own way. The cops got us separated. We went off to our party. And from what I understand, I had a big sign at the fairgrounds with home of Mark Coleman on it. And from what I understand, they went over to the sign and they celebrated victory, and they strapped a bed sheet over there with his name over it. And they took it as a victory, but
it was like Cecil Peoples. It was a Cecil Peoples type victory. It wasn't a real one.
I'm gonna have to say no contest. We'll call it a draw at best. But I was the only one that landed any punches.
I'm gonna say, Mark, I'm a firm believer, right? To me, the number one criteria is damage done. I mean, you cut the guy. Damage done wins a fight, right? Am I wrong there?
Well, that plus, yeah, definitely. That's why I had to throw that punch, because I wasn't too sure, man. I was pretty fucked up, to be honest with you, but I had to. That's why I threw that last punch. It wasn't a sucker punch. He was looking right at me, but I drew the blood, and then I notched it up as a win, and we went back. We had our party. I woke up the next day and I drove into my town, and this story had traveled the whole fucking town, and everywhere I went, everybody was telling me, I heard you got your ass whooped last night. And it just ate me alive, because it was so important to me. My daddy being undefeated, I'd never wanted to lose a street fight. So it ate me alive for 2 years. It just ate at me. And then finally I went back with Randleman, Ray Mendoza, a couple of my hometown buddies, and my great uncle Robert G. And we drove back into that fairgrounds, and Jesus, man. But that's when I found peace, because the cops had brought me in and said, Mark, what's going on? I said, look, this guy didn't whoop my ass. He didn't kick my ass. I'm tired of everybody saying he did. He's like, Mark, he don't. I said, the cop calmed me down. Same cop as 2 years earlier, my buddy's dad. And he said, I got to let it go. And I think I just let it go right then and realized how stupid I was letting this bother me. But
no, wait a minute. Did you send Randleman to the trailer to get him?
Yes. Yes. I told Randleman to go get him, and they went up and knocked on the camper door. He wasn't there. The whole town had heard I was coming. Somehow the whole town, I was at Miami of Ohio College, 3 hours away, but somehow the word got around, and they had cops everywhere that night. They knew I was coming, and they were ready. They were kind of ready. And
so they ruined the main event.
I think he wasn't there for a reason, but his wife was there and a bunch of her friends, and they come walk after Randleman got him. Randleman went and told him I'm here. And these ladies came out with weapons in their hands, and I asked them what the hell they're going to do with those. You know what I mean? I was drunk again.
Hey, Mike, don't let him fool you. He called from Miami of Ohio. I'm coming. That's how they knew he was coming.
He told everybody that was talking.
I'm coming.
You guys might want to be at a certain place at a certain time. Shit's gonna get cleared up.
I didn't want no police there. I didn't announce it. I didn't want the police there, because all the police can do is break it up, and I didn't want nobody breaking it up this time. I was ready to. I'm glad it didn't happen, because I don't like hurting people, but for 2 years, it ate me alive for 2 years. And then finally I was able to let it go. How stupid, man. How freaking stupid was I?
So sometimes, like in the early days of mixed martial arts, the NHB era, there would be like an exposed pole, like in the cage or like some rebar. I say those ropes were just, a faulty promoter leaving those things out. That's just my opinion.
No, man, I wasn't on my A game. I definitely wasn't on my A game. In hindsight, I should have been.
You got sloppy. You got sloppy.
When you're drinking a lot, that happens.
I was real fucking sloppy, and I didn't take him seriously enough. But
should have been ready for the takedown.
I didn't. Let's just put it this way: he didn't swing one time on me. So I don't see how you can lose a fight with somebody not swinging.
So,
yeah, no, but judges are, if Dave Meltzer was judging it, he'd probably have seen it for the other dude. You know what I mean, Mark?
Yeah. That's something I'm trying to let go. But I'm telling you what, that still eats me alive.
Yep.
Dave,
We'll get to
that.
I watched that damn fight a few times here recently. I watched it, and I find myself watching it, wondering and waiting for something bad to happen, and it never happened. I mean, all of a sudden, it's getting towards 13-minute mark, 14-minute mark, and I'm like, oh, something bad must happen. Nothing happened, and then the buzzer rings, and it just makes me sick to my stomach. Eddie Goldman too.
Wait a minute. Wait. We're getting way ahead. Mark,
my fault, Mark. And we haven't even mentioned the fight, so we won't.
No, people don't even know what we're talking about. So that's the Pedro Rizzo fight. We will get to that. But let's start from the beginning. We can't jump ahead like that, otherwise it becomes disjointed. All right, so Mark, your first fight was on July 12th.
We go back, jump ahead. That's how we do it at the Hammer House. Jump ahead and go back.
It's like a Pulp Fiction movie.
So, Martino, your first UFC was July 12, 1996 at UFC 10 in Alabama. At the time, there was no biting, no eye gouging, and no fish hooking. Everything else was on the table. When you decided to enter that event, where did you get your training from?
I threw a heavy bag on the ground and I pounded the fucking shit out of it. I was trying out for the Olympics in '96. I really, after '92 Olympics, I lost my mind for a while. I just was so disappointed in how I did at the Olympics. And, I just started really experimenting with booze and some other drugs. And I never regrouped to get back the eye that I once had. And, but then I seen the UFC on TV and I knew I had new life because I was, wrestling, there's just nowhere to go, man. Just, you're wrestling for a fake gold medal, a yellow medal, we call it sometimes. And, I lost it, man. I stayed off the mats. I didn't miss a weight training session though. I mean, that's key because I didn't do any wrestling. I was so sick of wrestling, but I kept getting in the weight room and without the wrestling, I started gaining some size. So I was getting up to 225, 230 without having to do all the mat work. So I was gaining size and I was gaining a lot of strength. This was important. But then I had to go try out the Olympic trials. I really didn't care if I made it or not. That's the kind of effort I put in. But I drew Mark Kerr in the first round, who was he was the world team member at the time. Him and Kurt Angle were they were the two big names. But I came out of retirement and they were definitely had an eye on me because I was pretty damn good at what I did. And I beat Kurt in the first round. And old Kurt Angle was getting worried because I was the only guy that could possibly beat him. But then I choked in the semifinals. I lost to one of my other rivals. I lost to him, and then basically the dream's over. It really wasn't that much of a dream because I didn't deserve. I didn't put in the effort or the time needed to become the team member. And plus I was thinking I want to fight. I had to figure out how I'm going to get in this UFC. What do I got to do to get in it? Because that's my belt. That's my fucking belt. And that's what I really dreamed of as a kid, is being the baddest man on the planet. And as soon as I lost to in the semifinals, this creepy looking dude with a porn star cheesy mustache, he came up to me and he introduced himself as Richard Hamilton. And he had jumped into Dan Severn's corner somehow. He offered Severn was training in Arizona for his fights, but this guy was pretty sneaky. This Richard Hamilton guy, he was actually pretty knowledgeable too, in a sneaky way. But he had snuck into his corner, then he had snuck into Don Frye's corner. So the UFC, they gave him a slot in UFC 10. And he took me into a room. He approached me and told me he's got a slot in UFC 10. And my first question was, well, who else you looking at? I knew he wasn't just looking at me. He was looking at Mark Kerr and Tom Erickson. And I looked right at him. I said, listen, I'll beat the fuck out of both those two guys. And I'll beat the fuck out of Don Frye. I said, I'm the man for the job. I'll win that bitch. I guarantee you, I don't need to know nothing else about you. I didn't care. I just wanted in because, hey, the UFC was potentially going to go out of business. So I needed to get in there before they went out of business, because this was my ticket to what I really dreamed of. And I dreamed of being a world champion. I never got it in wrestling. I took second, which left me with an empty feeling in my stomach. And then I looked at, then he had this big old contract. He slid it to me and he said, you need to take it home and let your attorneys look at it. I said, no, I don't. I said, I'll sign that bitch. I don't give a shit what it says. I want in. So pretty much I talked my way in. I think he liked the way I talked, and he felt comfortable, and he picked me over Kerr and Erickson. And I flew out to Arizona like a couple of days later. I flew out to Arizona. And I had about 35 days to really, really try to get myself in shape, because I knew that was the key. I had the motivation, the inspiration that I had lost in 1992. It was back. And he showed me some things. Nobody realizes that, yes, I did go over the arm bar. I did go over the triangle choke. I did go over those things, but I pretty much trained myself. I took over and trained myself. He had some good people in there for me to work out with. People don't know this, but I went with some pretty good people. And I decided to go with this guy. And the next thing you know, I'm walking in the cage 35 days later. And obviously it went pretty well. It kind of went just as I planned.
So let's kind of walk through this. Richard Hamilton, you mentioned his name. He's in your corner for your first like 5 or 6 fights in the UFC. And Richard later on.
First 2 shows, just the first 2 shows.
Okay, so UFC 10 and 11. So it's 5 fights. And in essence, what takes place is, from what I understand, is that the FBI eventually pays you a visit, as well as other people, because he's in a witness protection program for some child trafficking stuff, and he wasn't allowed around children, and they were really concerned, based on his interactions at his gym, that he was bringing all these fighters to. Is that correct?
It's not exactly, but he was a very religious guy. He preached the Lord. He acted like a saint, and we're just driving. After I won UFC 10. He wants to fly me. I was getting a little frustrated with him already. Even after UFC 10, I knew I wanted to get away from the guy, but I signed a contract. The contract I ended up signing, it would have been wise to have an attorney look at it, but it is what it is. I was in, and that's all that mattered to me. And then, so I'm back out for the second training camp. I like training out there. It was nice to get away from everything and just be able to train full time. But I didn't really like all the stuff that he tried to get me to do. I kind of took over my own camp. But
so that's another tie-in.
We're driving to practice one day, and I looked at him. I was telling him about my past and some of the bad things that I had done in my past, and he felt, I guess he felt obligated to tell me that his name wasn't really Richard Hamilton. He had been busted in New York with a big drug ring making methamphetamine, and he decided to tell me all this, and he told me he's in a witness protection program, and yeah, I just kind of sat there and fucking said, how am I got to get away from this dude, you know? So the stuff with the stuff with the child came later. He ended up hooking up with one of his students who was underage, and he tried to pawn her off on me. I mean, he told me this girl really likes me and this and that. And I was like, well, how fucking old is she? You know, she was only like 15 or 16. And no, I definitely wasn't interested. But as it turns out, he ended up, he had already raped her. So, but it didn't matter, because I left him. I walked away from the contract, and I broke the contract. I mean, I signed it, and I assumed he was in jail for the rape or the attempted rape, whatever it was. And I assumed that I was going to be able to get out of this contract because of that, but that wasn't the case. Just because he's in jail doesn't mean I can get out of it. I ended up settling. I owed him like $125,000. He ended up winning a $125,000 suit against me. But the beauty of it was his attorneys didn't protect it against bankruptcy, and I ended up filing bankruptcy, and I didn't have to pay him a dime. So that made me feel pretty good.
So that's a lot of cigarettes and ramen noodles from the commissary. He'd have been king shit there. But I mean, what kind of a dumbass is this guy anyway? I mean, you're in witness relocation and you're cornering people in the UFC. I mean, people are going to see you. You know what I mean? How's that possible?
Well, that's what I was thinking. You know, I mean, because he definitely knew where the camera was located. He knew where the camera was located. He was pretty sneakishly brilliant. He's the one that held the sign that said 3 Gracies in one night. I wouldn't have done something like that, but in hindsight, it was a beautiful move because it pissed the Gracies off big time. And he did that, and he's the one that talked me into, after I won my first fight against Moti Hornstien. I was used to street fights, and street fights is usually 1 or 2 punches at the most, and it's over. Well, Moti Hornstien, he took about 8 to 10 of my punches, and I got backstage and I said, look, I ain't wearing these fucking gloves. They're getting in the way. And Richard Hamilton, thank God, he told me, you got to keep the gloves on, Mark. You're going to hurt your hands. And I didn't think about that. So luckily I wore the gloves against Big Daddy. I had to hit him a bunch of times, and my hands were super sore going into the finals. And then I had to hit Don Frye. Shit, it seemed like 1,000 times.
So let's wait. Let's kind of like rewind right here. So UFC 10 comes, Don Frye wins UFC 8. So he's the heavy favorite walking into this tournament. The other 2 people that they're looking at is Mark Hall and Gary Goodridge, because Gary went to the finals of UFC 8. So they put Mark on opposite ends of Frye, and they put him in against Moti Hornstien, who's a 3-time Israeli karate champion. You guys got to look at his record. Like, after Mark, he gets beat up by Dirty Bob Schreiber a couple times. Like, he's 1-6 against 6 guys that are all in the Hall of Fame, or are like filthy fighters that are known for just like horrible tactics. So they put him against Moti Hornstien, and Moti actually won the Shidokan tournament here in Chicago a few like months prior to this. So he's as legit as they come. And Mark wins via ground and pound. And it kind of set the tone for what the rest of the tournament was about to look at. It was like almost like a holy shit moment because of just how dominant Mark was. Can we agree on that, Mark?
I was feeling pretty good afterwards. I mean, walking into the cage, I started getting a little bit of negative thoughts. I was worried about the Karate Kid's crane kick. I was thinking this guy's world champion karate. I started saying, oh man, what if this dude karate kicks me? But you know, I shook it off, and yeah, I mean, things worked out. The Is that what he could use the crane kick on? In the
He went underneath one of his kicks and got a takedown.
Yeah.
And
well, yeah. Then after that fight, I felt a hell of a lot more confident because I wasn't sure. You know, I mean, I really wasn't positive. I was very confident leading up to it, but then, you know, you got to keep that worm of doubt out the whole time. And so, you know, the worm tried to creep in as I'm walking into the cage, but it didn't really matter. I mean, it didn't matter.
So these are the early days of the UFC. Am I remembering? Did Moti wear a gi?
No.
No,
No
okay.
gi.
I knew Mike had watched it, but you call him Karate Kid. I think he's worn a gi in other fights. So my memory.
He walked in with the gi, but took it off.
Okay, gotcha.
No, you're correct. So Mark's next fight is against the finals. You know, the guy that took second, Gary Goodridge, in the last tournament with Don Frye, and it goes 7 minutes, man. Like
Wow.
It's 7 minutes long. So Gary Goodridge is 3-2. His only losses are to Mark Schultz, one of your former training partners at Foxcatcher, and Don Frye, two really high-end wrestlers. So on paper, Mark looks like a favorite. What were your concerns going in with Gary Goodridge?
He looked scary.
He played the part.
Yeah.
He looked scary. All my friends were worried to death for me, but honestly, I was very confident, especially since he had that gi on. He was big and strong. You know, that's all. You know, it's just you got to be concerned, but I was very cautious. People don't know I use a lot more strategy than anybody wants to think. I was very smart out there. I mean, I grounded, pounded, but I did it very strategically. And with Goodridge, it was kind of weird. You'll never see a fight like that again because he actually held on to the top of the cage, and instead of rushing things, I just decided to pick him apart from behind him and make sure everybody. A lot of people say, well, why didn't you elbow me in the head? Why didn't Big Daddy throw them elbows that he did to Herrera? Why didn't he do that to me? Well, because I know he can do that. So I have my head protected, but the uppercuts were there. And I just decided it felt good, man. I mean, I never really hit anybody up until this point. It just felt good landing these punches. But, hey, man, he's a tough dude, man. He took them all. And then, I don't know, he took about 20 of them. And then I finally took him down, and I looked at his face, and there wasn't a scratch on his face, man. He's got some thick skin. I said, Jesus Christ. But then I got Big Daddy down, and that's when I started unleashing the ground and pound, man. I started throwing headbutts, and Gary Goodridge, he looked at me, and he opened his mouth real wide, and he exposed his teeth to me, basically saying, headbutt me right here. And I said, thanks for the offer. Like this. You know, he was like that. And I said, well, thanks for the offer, but I'm a little smarter than that because I don't want a tooth stuck in my fucking forehead. So I took his offer and I just smashed him in the eyeball or something. And I just kept going. And then it was, you know, when he had that gi on, it just made it so much easier to grab on, to hold him, control him. And then he kind of bellied down. I put the boots in. You know, it was wrestling, take away the rules, you know. So I'm going to put the boots in and, you know, rear naked choke. I mean, it's just kind of obvious. You know, I'm going to go for the rear naked choke. I'm a little bit disappointed that he tapped out when he did because me and Big Daddy are good friends now. But, you know, you gotta let me lock it up and choke you out at least, you know. Or I could have just, you know, ground and pounded him. But so, you know, I wish he would have let me at least lock it up and choke him out, but submission by whatever you want to call it.
Well, this is how smart Gary Goodridge was. Like, he was somebody that actually thought inside the cage, which a lot of people weren't doing at this time. At one point, Gary gets up from Mark's takedown, and he's got his hands in the cage looking away from Mark, and Mark is coming up underneath him with uppercuts, you know, just, you know, playing rock'em sock'em robots. And he's in Mark's corner. So, you know, Mark's corner is telling him, go left, go right, go left, go right with the uppercuts. So Gary goes, wait a minute. I don't want to be here, and hand crawls all the way to the other side of the cage so he could be in front of his own corner and get instruction. Like it really is like a moment in the UFC where you saw somebody thinking in the cage, which really wasn't happening on the American Canadian side at the time. You really only saw it on the Brazilian side. It was an interesting moment in that round.
Well, I definitely wasn't listening to my cornermen at all in my corner, so I didn't need them. I knew I was very instinctual out there. I knew where the face was. I knew how to get to it. And then, when he did walk around the cage, I could have took some chances and try to yank him off or took him down, but I was patient. And when he got to his corner, they really didn't have no good advice for him. They didn't have no good advice for him. He just stood there basically and ate a lot of punches. And I was just softening him up. But when he did finally turn and face me, he probably should have did that about 4 minutes earlier.
So after this bout, you head to the finals against Don Frye. You're like the last, like it's literally the next fight on the card. How much time did they give you in between bouts for you to recover before you made the walk again?
Well, they had come in and they had told me pretty much right away. They said, "You're up."
Oh man.
And I looked at him and said, "That's fucking great because I'm fucking ready." Because they remind me of wrestling. Wrestling, you wrestle 3, 4 times, 5 times in one day. So really, I was getting a lot better as we go. I mean, I felt great after I used Big Daddy as another warm up, and so I looked at him and said, "Let's go. I'm fucking ready. Sounds good." And then they went back to Don Frye, and that son of a bitch said he needed more time. So then they wanted him to win. They came back and told me it's going to be a little while because Frye needed more time to recover. So I just felt better. I mean, I felt really good going into the finals.
All right. So you're with Don Frye in the finals. And during the bout, Tank Abbott, I don't know if you guys have had a relationship prior to this or not, but he from the seats is yelling advice to you to relax, Mark, grab the fence, relax. And it's a pretty poignant time in a fight because you do listen to him. And Don Frye,
I didn't listen to Tank Abbott.
Pardon me?
I did not listen to Tank Abbott.
Okay. It just happens to coincide with his advice. But
it's the obvious advice.
So at one point, there's a couple of times.
Yeah, I had met Tank. I went down to the bar, definitely not to have any beer or nothing. I just left my room the night before to just get away for a little bit. And sure enough, Tank was in there already barstooled up and for some reason, he showed me all kinds of respect without even knowing me. He just showed me all kinds of respect, and we had a nice little conversation. So that was pretty cool because, I'm a fanboy as well. I mean, I respected and I like Tank, but he showed me respect. So then, I don't even know if I heard him yelling. I might have actually heard him yelling. I didn't know it was him though. I mean, there's too much going on out there to realize it's Tank Abbott yelling, but it was obvious what he was saying.
So during the bout, Big John McCarthy stops it so the doctor can check Don Frye. And Mark, this is going to be a reoccurring theme. Now, this is the beginning of like the rules and regulations. I'm going to point out several instances where the rules were tilted against you, and this is one of them. So at one point, they need the doctor to check Mark or to check Don Frye. After the doctor checks Don and clears him, while they stopped the bout while Mark was doing on side mount and doing like a half guard ground and pound. So
could have been stopped right there. He was done.
But they restart the fight with both guys on their feet. So Mark has got to work to get the takedown again.
Crazy.
I was pretty pissed, to say the least. Big John pulled me off, and I got up. I looked at him and said, "Is it over? Is it over?" And Big John had something against me, man. He was he was trying to be the big man in that cage. He had something against me. We're good friends now, but he more than once. I don't know. They just didn't want me to win or something, but I said, is it over? And he looked at me, he says, go to your corner. And I was like, what the fuck? What's going on here, man? Because, hey, by this time, you know, I realized what the hell I got myself into here, man. My hands were throbbing. I just wanted to win. You know, I wanted to win at this point. And then what are they doing? You know, I mean, I could tell they're playing games already, but yeah, then they restarted us on our feet to give him a chance to use his professional boxing to knock me out. But no, but by that time it was a done deal. And I just took him back down. I gave him about 4 more minutes of some serious ground and pound. And I was feeling horrible, man. I was really worried that I was going to have to kill this guy because Don Frye he's never going to quit. I mean, he just never would quit. And he's still defending himself, kind of. I mean, there really was no defense to my ground and pound because I have a head and 2 hands, and all you got is your face and 2 hands to defend with. So something was always open. A rib shot, punch, or a headbutt. Something was always open, and it just came natural to me. You know, it's not like I have been training this for years. It just really came natural to me. And I was feeling bad because I looked at Don Frye and his eyes were pretty much swollen shut. And Big John looked at him and said, "You all right, Don?" And I was hoping he didn't say nothing, you know, but he looked over. He kind of opened his eyes a little bit. He said, "I'm fine." I'm like, Jesus Christ, you know, and that's when, you know, because I was just staring at him, waiting for him to say, "No, I'm not all right," you know, but I was staring at him. He caught me staring at him, and he threw a punch from the bottom. It's really one of the only times he hit me. And I tell you what, he still had a little zip on that punch. I mean, it just woke me back up, and I said, all right. And I smashed him with a couple more headbutts, and I just started the attack again. And then John pulled me off the second time. And by this time, I was really confused, you know. Is it fucking over? Go to your corner again. And I'm just like, man, you know, at that point, I'm just hoping it's over. And I finally seen him wave it off, and it was a dream come true, man. I felt like I was the baddest man on the planet at the time, and a lot of hard work throughout my whole life. It paid off right then. I knew, and then I'm walking out of the cage, and I was saying to myself, man, this is going to be the biggest sport in the fucking world someday, and the Russians are coming.
That foresight.
And I said that to myself because I dealt with the Russians.
Things.
I dealt with the Russians a lot in wrestling, and they're bad son of bitches, man.
Tough.
Bad. So
Really
they
tough.
they are coming. They did come too. They're here.
So, you know, Mark, you tend to draw inspiration from various things, like that. The opening story that we had talked about with Mike Overmyer, which was the other gentleman's name. I had heard that from Wes several times, Brandon Hinkle as well, and they said that moment inspired you. After this fight, after you get done with your interview with Joe Rogan, you mentioned Olympic wrestling coach Bobby Douglas, and shame on him for predicting that you wouldn't have won.
Yeah, man, I had demons, man, because Mike Van Arsdale he was good friends with Bobby Douglas, and he filled me in that Bobby picked Don Frye to win.
Ooh.
And I can't believe it, but that just sat in my head because me and Bobby Douglas went overseas a few times on trips, and he was a feisty dude, man. He was a badass, but I had his back a few times that he got into some arguments, and it just really bothered me that he made that really, really insane pick. I thought he was really, really, really foolish. And I had told myself, if I win this bitch, when I win this bitch, I said, I'm going to call him out. And sure enough, it was on my mind when I'm giving that interview afterwards. I was going to make damn sure they didn't walk away without me calling his old ass out. I said, I said, hey, Bobby Douglas, you're not that old. What kind of prediction was that, man? And he was watching it at home in Arizona with a room full of people, and he had no idea it was coming. He's watching it with a room full of wrestlers and stuff, and all of a sudden I threw that at him, and holy shit, he's like, what the hell? Who told him that? Who told him? You know, so yeah, you know, I hold grudges, man, but I'm learning not to hold grudges anymore, man. Gotta let things go. I held on to shit to motivate me for a long time.
That's good. That's good.
Cool.
So did you guys have a conversation after that, or was that it?
Bobby?
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm not positive if I've seen him since. So I probably haven't seen him because I would probably remember. But we would just hug each other. We would just give each other a hug and move on, because you can't get them all right, man. You can't get all. If it was that easy to pick a fight, everybody'd be rich.
Yeah. Mike, I got a question here real quick. You know, and tell me if I'm messing up the timeline, and if so, let's wait. He mentioned fox catch a little bit there. Can we dive into that or hit it?
Go ahead.
Okay, you brought up. I mean, we didn't touch too much on your time before you fought in UFC a little bit. You talked about being out there at fox catcher. What can you tell us about that whole scenario? And I didn't even know really you were involved with that.
Yeah, I was. There wasn't any money in wrestling. It was just everybody was a bunch of poor, broke wrestlers trying to survive and win that Olympic gold. And I was in that same case. I was already on a team, New York Athletic Club. They were my sponsor. They flew me to tournaments and stuff. But John DuPont started his club, and the rumor is everybody was getting like $1,500 a month. And that was a lot of money to a wrestler. That was a lot of money. That would have helped out. That would have helped out drastically. But he wouldn't let me on the team because, well, I felt obligated to New York Athletic Club. But at the same time, I told him, look, man, I need this money to eat. And so I think they understood. But John DuPont wouldn't let me on the team because one of my main rivals, Dan Chade, was their 220-pounder at the time. So he was one of the first guys on Team Foxcatcher. So DuPont was loyal to him, and he wouldn't let me on the team because you know, we were big time rivals, both going for the Olympics. But then I made the world team, and I had beaten Dan Chade. I made the world team, and John DuPont wants to be the best. So he opened his arms and he welcomed me on. And it was beautiful. You know, I mean, he was a creepy dude. He was extremely, extremely creepy. I mean, ugly, weirdo, just scary, man. It's hard to, and he didn't like the fact that, because you got nervous around him because he was so rich and because he was so creepy. So he didn't like that. He didn't like when he could tell you're nervous and stuff. So that's why he liked Dave Schultz so much, because Dave Schultz wasn't intimidated by him at all. So they had normal conversations. But me, you know, I just was, you know, kind of in awe of this guy. And I stayed when I made the world team, I got to stay in what they call the big house. His house was called the big house on the farm. Me and Kevin Jackson, we both got the room in there, and that was beautiful, man. Everything for a wrestler who had nothing, all of a sudden we got everything we want right at the tip of our hands. Open the fridge. The fridge was stocked full of great food, and it was just nice, man. I mean, I felt important, you know, at the time, but obviously that turned out to be one of the saddest moments in all of wrestling's history, when this guy, he was out of his mind. I mean, he was seeing demons. He was doing cocaine. He was drinking a lot. We didn't know these things. He's pretty sneaky with it. He hit it pretty well. We really didn't know he was drinking all the time and doing the coke. It's pretty surprising that he hit it so well. And he had the demons, man. He was talking about the house moving, and one day all of a sudden he got rid of every piece of equipment in the Foxcatcher's every piece of equipment that had a clock on it, he got all paranoid about clocks. For some reason, he was paranoid that clocks were evil. So every treadmill or every piece of equipment that had a clock on it, he threw them out. You know what I mean? Just out of nowhere. Stuff like this would happen all the time.
Wait, Mark, wait, I don't mean to interrupt, but would he have like a crew of people that he would rely on to just, kind of comply with this crazy behavior? Was it the other wrestlers that you guys were in charge of throwing his stuff away? Or did he have like on-site ground crew to get rid of clocks one day?
Well, he was a loner, man. He had a secretary that did everything for him. And when he wanted something done, it's not that hard to get it done when you're worth fucking $1 billion, so we didn't have a big crew on there, but there were 16 houses on the farm, and they were all beat up and stuff, but wrestlers getting to live there for free. And the facility he built, a $2, $3, $4 million facility, was like state of the art. We wrestlers just didn't see nothing like this. So it was kind of like everybody was jealous, but he did show a lot of signs of being really, really creepy and really potentially dangerous. He had pulled a gun on the guy I was telling you about, Dan Shade, my rival. He had pulled a shotgun on him one time because he brought a girl onto the farm. You weren't allowed to have any girls on the farm. He didn't like girls. DuPont didn't like girls, even though his secretary was a girl. He liked her, but he told Shade, and Shade took off. And so that was the big sign. But unfortunately, nobody did anything because wrestling's a poor sport, and he was keeping wrestling alive. So they stuck with him, and then he lost his mind. He thought Dave Schultz was out to get him. For some reason, he started getting these creepy feelings in his head that he thought Dave Schultz was out to get him for some reason. One of the reasons, I have no idea why, but he just felt like Dave Schultz was out to get him. And next thing you know, he was a bona fide marksman with the gun. I mean, he could hit you from a mile away. And he decided, for some reason, he just lost it and decided to pull his trigger on one of everybody's most favorite wrestlers in the history of wrestling. Dave Schultz was loved by everybody. I love the guy. He was a mentor to me. He showed me so much. He was on a couple world teams. We went to Russia together. Me and Dave Schultz went to Russia together, and we went to Russia, and they loved him in Russia because he learned to speak the language, and he actually had somebody. Wow. He wrestled a Russian in the finals of the Tbilisi, which at the time was the biggest tournament of any. It was bigger and harder to win than the Olympics because you got 35 Russians in there, and you got the Americans in there. But it was only 13 Americans that ever won the tournament. But Dave Schultz, at the age of 36, he's in the finals with a young Russian guy, and the fans were rooting for him over their own guy. They were rooting for him, cheering for him, and Dave Schultz had blew out his shoulder in the semifinals, so he's basically out there wrestling with one arm. So there was no action. It was 0-0 after 5 minutes. And at the time, the rules were somebody has to be declared the winner. Well, they declared the Russian the winner, but the fans went nuts, man. They started booing. They started throwing shit onto the mats, throwing oranges, throwing fucking whatever small coins. Although I can't believe they were throwing coins because they were so poor. I don't know where it must have been less than a penny or something, because they were throwing shit and the crowd was going nuts. They weren't having it. And so next thing you know, they could sense that there was going to be a riot that broke out if they declared the Russian the winner. So they restarted the match. They went into overtime. They went a couple minutes into overtime. Nobody could score because Schultz, this is not typical Schultz. He don't go 0-0. This guy's a score machine. But because of the bad shoulder, he really was waiting for the other guy to try something. The other guy was being very cautious, but he was pushing the pace, though. So So they brought them together, and the crowd started booing again. And they ended up raising both guys' arms. This has never happened in the history of wrestling ever. They raised both guys' arms and declared both of them champions just to keep the crowd at peace. But that Russian trip, I was a young boy. I was 27, just out of college, and I went on that trip, and we was there for 21 days. They didn't have no fucking heat, and I'm not exaggerating when I say they didn't have no heat. You could see your breath in the arena. They heated the arena with the fans. They heated the arena with the fans, and then we got to the hotel room, and I'm like, oh, just praying for some heat, and there was no heat in the hotel room. So I was a young boy, but turned me into a man. You know what I mean? I was there for 21 days, but that really, really fast forwarded me turning into a man growing up, because I came back a different person. I had lost 20 pounds because they just literally did not have any food. They did not have any food, so I didn't even have to cut weight to make weight, because I was already on weight, because I took a bunch of protein powder with me, thank God. But I finished that up, and I took a bunch of beef jerkies with me, and everybody was my best friend for about a couple of days, because everybody wanted to come into my room and get the beef jerky. And oh hell, there's Kenny Monday. Here you go. John Smith, here you go. Everybody. Next thing it was gone, and I went down and I didn't recognize anything that was on the plate of food, and I didn't recognize it, and I would eat the hell out of it today, because I'm a different man. But back then, it just scared me, man. I didn't know what it was, and I just couldn't eat it. So I ended up losing 20 pounds. I came back with ice bags all over my body, because it was a rough trip, man.
Now, Mark, it's funny. Like, people don't really get that sometimes. I think, the people in Russia and different parts of the world, they have to do. It's just so hard living there. That's why I think they're such good fighters. I always think, in a way, it's too easy in America. We've gotten lazy. You look at parts where the good boxing used to be, Detroit and all these other places. Living's too easy in America. You got to go to a place like Russia where you live hard, Mexico where they live hard, and those are the best wrestlers, fighters, because it's a hard mentality to have, and it's hard to have that if you have everything at hand. These people don't have. It's a different mentality they've developed, and it's hard for us to compete with that, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I was blessed. I grew up pretty poor. We didn't have a lot of money, but that was definitely a blessing in disguise, because that's what motivated me. I was going to be the best in the world at something, because I wanted to be able to make money, and that was definitely a blessing in disguise, being poor. And just for example, I think old Conor McGregor's in big trouble with all that money. It's going to be pretty hard to get out of his silk pajamas and put that smelly ass wrestling gear back on. I don't think you ever see the same McGregor again. It's just too hard, too much money, too easy.
I've been saying that for a long time. Once this is not the most important thing in your life, where do you go from there? And if you want to do what, it's hard. I've never had $200 million. And if so, I guarantee you give me, I'm not doing it. You know what I mean? I promise you that. So I don't see how you motivate yourself. You can think you want to do it worse than anything.
Yeah.
But when push comes to shove, you don't want it more than anything. You've already accomplished it.
Yeah. But unfortunately for him, I think he needs help big time. I think he needs help. And I think it's going to be very difficult for him to get help, because he's never going to be able to replace the high that he got from getting his arm raised. There's nothing that compares to that. Not even sex, not even close. Getting your arm raised in a fight is by far the highest thing I've ever done in my life. And he's never going to replace that. So I actually think deep down he's very miserable.
Well, Mark, it's funny to me, and I always tell people how they don't, like you talk about that high. Even after you win a fight, you're up on this high, and then even like for the next week, it goes down a little bit, but it's still there. And then the week after, it goes down a little bit, but it's still there. You like that for a long time, and then all of a sudden, like, I got to get that back. I got to fight again. I got to fight again. But like you're saying, he had one win in the last 5 years. He's kind of spiraling out of control. I think he just punched some DJ in the face for no reason. I'm like, I think you're right. I think he's spiraling, and it's going to be a hard landing. Watch.
Yeah, for sure. That's what helped keep me sober all those years, was wrestling and fighting. And then when they took it away from me, when I was, my doctor just told me I was done, even though I was 44 years old. I wasn't done, man. I had a lot more fights left in me, but I don't listen to nobody, or I didn't. I do now, but he told me I needed a hip replacement. For some reason, I listened to him. In hindsight, I didn't really need it. I didn't have to get it when I did, and that ate at me. It ate at me for years. But once they took the fighting away, no wrestling, no fighting, I was lost. I pretty much drank every day for the last 10 years, and I'm very blessed that I checked into rehab and got that under control. And I got 6 months sober, and I've never been more at peace and more happy in my life.
Proud of you, man. That's fantastic. One more point, Mike, and I'm done. The thing with people don't understand, when you have like fighters in there, it's like, it makes sense. Life makes sense. I got a fight coming up in 2 months. I have to do A, B, C. I got to set up training like this. I have to eat this. I have to go to the gym here. You know exactly what you have to do every day. When that's over, man, it's tough on people. If that's all you've done for 40 years, now what do I do every day? Like you say, now you have time to go to rate, because what else are you going to do, man? I mean, that order is important. And that's why I think another reason fighters like to have fights lined up. Life makes sense when you have a fight lined up. When you don't have it, you're like wandering randomly. You don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's what happened to me. When I wrestled, I was young enough to know that I had to do it pretty much year round. But then I found myself in fighting. I was older, and I'd lost the eye for a few years. I found the other side, and how much easier it is to be lazy. I found out how easy it is, and then but then I would bust my ass. But then once the fight was over, 2 weeks went by so fast where you didn't do nothing, but you took 2 weeks off. You deserve a week or 2 weeks off, but 2 weeks led to 3 weeks. And then I found myself just waiting for them to announce when my next fight is. And until I found out the next fight was coming up, I didn't put in the time, so I really never gave 100% in MMA. I just never did. I mean, there's short periods of times where I killed myself, but before the Pride Grand Prix, I was pretty much rock bottom. I had lost 3.5, 4 fights in a row.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty much rock bottom, and then I realized I had to fight that big monster to get in, and I pretty much had an 8-month training camp. It kind of reminded me of when I wrestled for the, going for the national championship or the Olympics. It was 8 months grind. And by the time the Pride Grand Prix got around to it, I had 8 months under my belt of pretty much sobriety and pure training. And going into that tournament, my confidence was never higher. Even though the whole world counted me out for the dead, it had been a good time to bet some cash on me, because I knew that I was going to win that tournament. I really, really deep down knew.
Well, let me just kind of tie a knot on Foxcatcher before we move on. Were you there the day that Dave Schultz was murdered?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't there, but it was a top story, so it came on. It came on. You didn't have much TV back then, but somehow it made its way on TV, and it was the whole wrestling world just mourned. It was just the saddest thing ever. It was just horrible, and after it happened, it's too late. But after it happened, everybody realized the signs were there that something like this could possibly happen. But nobody thought anything like this could happen, even though he had pulled a gun on somebody else. I think greed had a lot to do with him still being around.
Wow. Well, let's move on to UFC 11, September 20th, 1996. It's in Augusta, Georgia. So in essence, this event is kind of titled, I said that the underlying theme is the return of Tank Abbott. So apparently at UFC 8, which took place in Puerto Rico, Tank Abbott caused a huge brawl outside of the cage, and he was suspended for 7 months. And this was his comeback fight. So they had put you on opposite ends of the bracket of Tank, and Mark, you're up 5 pounds from the last UFC. I looked at the weigh-ins, and
what did the
look to
weigh-in
be in.
say? What did the weigh-in
Pardon me?
say? What did the weigh-in say?
I think it was like 245.
No, that's not true though. I mean, I never weighed that much for a fight. Never. 235. My first UFC, I was 235, and then maybe 238 or something. The second one, I was never as high as they said I was.
Okay. Yeah, they marked you higher. So they gave you somebody that is 27-2 in Mexican bare knuckle bouts.
Badass.
He's a 42-year-old guy that looks like he pushes a popsicle like truck, named Julian Sanchez.
My knees were wobbly as hell, man. I was terrified.
He's looking for a popsicle, man. Come on.
It took 49 seconds, but I'm going to tell you this. We saw Kevin Randleman walk Mark Coleman to the cage. And that was the UFC debut of us seeing, Kevin Randleman.
Yes, sir. Yeah, me and Kevin we had lost contact. 92, I had after the Olympics, I kind of lost my mind. 92 was, other than the Olympics, it was a bad year, man. I got in trouble with the law, growing marijuana plants, ridiculous, but got in trouble there. My sister had died, and I wasn't happy with placing 7th. It just did not sit well with me at all, because I planned on winning them, and so I turned to the bottle back then. Turn to the bottle and experiment with other drugs. Kevin, on the other hand, I was his coach at Ohio State, and he had won 2 national titles and took second in his freshman year. One of the baddest wrestlers I've ever seen in my life. It was just such a pleasure and honor to hook up with him and be able to train somebody with that kind of mentality and the physical specimen that he wasn't that all that physically badass when he came to Ohio State. And we didn't talk to each other for first half of the year, not because I was coaching myself in the upper weights and he was kind of in between. So we never even had a conversation the first 3 months of the season. And he wasn't happy at Ohio State. He was going home every weekend. He didn't really like Ohio State. But when he came back from the break, I was in the weight room. First day back from Christmas break, I seen him down there training with the strength coach, who I didn't see eye to eye with. And I said, "Oh, geez, man, he's going to grab Kevin Randleman. What a waste. It's going to be such a waste." But then Randleman walked by me, and I asked him if he wanted to train with me today. And he was very surprised, because he thought I didn't like him. He really thought I didn't like Randleman. And well, we ended up having one hell of a workout session together. Everybody was keeping eyes on us because we were moving some weight. And I told him he could train with me every day. And I found out later that he ran home. He called his mom and told his mom that Coleman likes me, and we're going to be training together every day. So that was it, man. He never missed. We never missed another workout. And it was just obvious what he was capable of doing pretty quick, because then he went home for the summer. We trained for like 3 months in the weight room. I showed him what it's going to take and how to do it. And he went home for the summer, and I told him, I said, "I'll be able to tell what you did this summer, Kevin." And so then 3 months passed. He came back, and I knew right away he stuck with the program. He came back looking like the monster, and he went from really getting his butt whooped in the practice room by a lot of people to coming back and being he actually beat the national champion a week earlier in the Big Ten. So he took second, but he could have been a national champion. That's how quick his body responded to some seriously hard training. And he was just a badass. But then his senior year, his grades were a little bit low. And this is 92 when I was in the Olympics, and he went back home. He quit Ohio State, and we hadn't talked to each other for like 2 years. And then he got a sniff of watching me in the UFC, and then I finally reached out and contacted him, and it was game on. Once again, we reunited, and turned into the monster. But I will add, in this, I can say with 100% honesty, old dude never took me down one time in 15 years of training. Not one time, baby. I wasn't going to give it to him because he would have known. He would have known if I let him get me. But goddamn, boy, I mean,
Nick Nutter told us that.
I don't know how, but he didn't. It was, everything was a contest to me and Kevin. And I didn't like giving up takedowns in practice. I got a lot of people that are on that list that never took me down. So,
oh yeah, we talked to Nick Nutter a while ago, and he was just talking about. I don't know if he ever saw you got taken down, maybe once or twice, but he said
Nutter claimed he got one. Nutter claimed he got one.
He got one, but he blew out my fucking knee doing it.
That's what it was.
Illegal.
You wouldn't quit. You wouldn't give up
illegal.
the position and it blew your knee out. You're like, whatever, man. You ain't getting the takedown.
No, it wasn't that. He dirtily drove his shoulder through my fucking knee. He would never, if my knee wouldn't have blown out, he would have never finished the takedown. He wouldn't have got the takedown except my knee blew out. I'm not even going to give him a takedown. Actually,
Thank you, Mark.
Injury default. Injury.
Referee stoppage, no takedown.
Yes, I agree. So he's at 0.
So your second opponent, all right, Javier Mendez, obviously AKA founder, him and Xavier, his father, have done some incredible things with that gym. And one of the first people they brought to the forefront was a guy named Brian Johnston, Pain Inc. owner, Brian Johnston. And that's Mark's second opponent. Were you concerned going into that fight, Mark?
Well, they gave me an option before I think they wanted me to win. Well, they wanted Tank to win, but they definitely wanted me to make it to the finals. So they kind of gave me an option between Brian Johnston and somebody on the other side. I think there was a wrestler on the other side. They gave me a choice between Brian Johnston and the other guy.
Was it Adkins?
Not Atkins. I would have took him.
Was it Bolander?
Not Bolander.
Gurgel?
No.
David Travern?
Who?
David Travern?
Don't recognize that name. Is that it?
Go ahead. Go ahead with your story. I apologize.
Well, I was trying to figure it out. So I don't like I don't bullshit on my story. So I like having the facts. But they gave me a choice between Brian Johnston and some other guy. I don't know who the other guy was, but I thought he was a wrestler, and because of that, I took Brian Johnston because I had watched him. Well, who do you have? Was he?
He lost to Don Frye at UFC 8.
Was the other one Ferrozo they offered you?
No, he was the backup.
Okay.
Roberto Travern was the guy I was talking.
I don't know. It don't matter. I picked Johnston because I seen him in UFC. He wasn't in UFC 10, right, Johnston?
You know, he lost to Don Frye. I thought that was UFC 8. He lost to him in.
No, he was in UFC 10.
He was in UFC 10. Yes. You are correct.
He lost to Don Frye in UFC 10, and he only weighed about 225. And so yeah, I felt very confident I could whoop his ass. But then 2 months had passed, and pretty sure he took some vitamins, some special vitamins, and he showed up. He showed up weighing about 250.
Hey, yoked up.
He was jacked up, and I didn't know it when I said I'll take him on my side. So yeah, there was a little bit of concern, not a lot, because my confidence was through the roof, and I still figured I was going to be able to get him down. And I didn't know he was training with Javier Mendez, did he?
Yeah.
I didn't know nothing about that.
I think I got it, Mark. I think he fought Reza Nasri, who was a
Reza's the name, yeah, for sure.
Good job, Miguel.
I had a choice between Reza and Brian Johnston, and I took Brian because the Reza guy was a wrestler.
Yeah, the Reza guy was like a decorated Iranian wrestler. Like with your pedigree, you know about the Iranians too. They could be elite wrestlers, man.
Elite.
So
definitely elite. So yeah, Reza was the guy. So I took Johnston, but he came in at 245, 250, and he was he looked like a badass. But
well, he destroyed Nezra too. He
30 seconds.
He ate up Nezra in the first round. Looked like a complete monster.
Yeah, but so Reza was on my side too.
That was his first round matchup. So I imagine they gave you a choice. That's the other wrestler in there. So they mix up the
something
brackets.
like that.
So yeah,
something like that. But yeah, I watched him beat the wrestler, so he gave me some concerns, but really my confidence was through the roof. But the size that he put on, that I was thinking about that. But when the fight did start, I remember the fucking Jeff Blatnick, man. He didn't love me either. Jeff Blatnick, we became best friends, but he didn't love me because I was a freestyle wrestler and he was a Greco-Roman wrestler. So it was always that. But I honestly let Brian Johnston kick me in the leg. I was setting it up. I was setting him up, and I let him kick me, and I actually kind of acted like it hurt a little bit, and I showed some discomfort and stuff. And Jeff Blatnick was all over that. He's like, "Oh, Coleman don't like that. Coleman don't like that." But really, I let him have two because I knew he'd come back for the third one, and that's when I exploded, and it was over. It was over once I took him down. That's by far the strongest I'd ever been in my life. By this time, I had about 4 months of training, and so my conditioning was on point at that time. I was ready to beat anybody that night. Like I could have beat anybody. The UFC 10, I could have used a little more time to get my cardio up where I wanted it, but UFC 11, I was ready for anybody that night.
So this is how the tournament lays out. Wait, first off, a lot of people talk about the Just Bleed guy. He's kind of like a famous like little meme. I'm telling you guys this right now. At 1 hour and 11 minutes, there's a skinny white kid in the audience with no shirt throwing gang signs. Phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I can't believe people missed on that.
Legendary.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So this is how the tournament lays out. Mark Coleman beats Sanchez, 1 minute. You beat Brian Johnston in under 3 minutes. And Tank Abbott beats Sam Adkins. Bolander on the other side of Abbott beats Gurgel, but can't continue. So they bring in Ferrozo, and Ferrozo replaces Bolander, and Ferrozo beats the dog shit out of Tank Abbott. Like it is.
He did, man. It was
shocking.
It really showed how tough Tank Abbott was because he ate about 50 fucking knees to the stomach, man. And I was backstage watching this. And I was just licking my chops, man. I said, holy shit, whoever wins this, I'm going to destroy him. My confidence was through the roof watching those two guys fight because it didn't matter if they were fresh or not, but it certainly doesn't hurt for somebody to be a little beat up.
Yeah, for sure. So in essence, Ferrozo can't continue after this. They make the announcement that one of the alternates, Roberto Travin, who's from Alliance, Brazil, is going to take the spot because he won his alternate bout. Now, he won the alternate bout in like a minute and a half, and it was a quick fight. And Roberto Travin, I think, was probably watching the TV, and he goes, "Oh, that ain't happening." He claims he broke his hand, and no one else from the locker room. It was literally an off call. Who wants to fight Mark in the finals? And nobody stepped up. And they announced that you were the tournament winner.
What? You left out a little bit.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Severn, he definitely didn't break his hand. He was a young boy, and knowing the Brazilians now, they were very wise in pulling him out, because he would have took an ass whooping that night. But then they came back, they told me Trevor, and I said, okay. And then they said he's out, and then they said Tank Abbott. I said, Tank Abbott? Are you fucking serious? You know, and I said, that's fine with me. And Tank Abbott had told them, fuck you. I'm not fighting Mark Coleman right now. And then they came back, and I'm starting to get a little irritated, man. I want this fucking win. I want to be on my way and celebrate. And they came back and said, Don Frye said he'll fight you. Don Frye sitting in the front row, hammered. Don Frye said he will fight me. And it would have been worse than the first time, I guarantee, because I was much better by the second show. It'd have been a lot quicker. The second time would have been a lot quicker, but they came back and they decided that was probably a horrible idea for the whole company, and they didn't have anybody left. They just didn't have anybody left, and then well, I tell you what. So then they had me and Randleman go out there and do an exhibition, but Kevin Randleman was all in. He told me to hit him. You know, he says, let's go out there and you hit me, Coleman. He goes, you hit me all the time in practice, you know, hit me. And I don't know, man. I just had a bad feeling. and I just wouldn't hit him. But in hindsight, we could have put on a hell of a pro wrestling fight out there. Me and Randleman could have put on a hell of an entertaining fight for the crowd, because I didn't hit him, but I suplexed the shit out of them, and the fans were excited about the first couple suplexes, but when they realized I wasn't going to hit this guy, they started booing. So that came to an end. But in hindsight, me and Randleman could have put on a hell of an exhibition.
Mark, I got a question. At this point, who owns UFC? Is it still R. Davies, or is it Bob Merowitz and SCG? Who's owning it at this point?
I think Bob Meyerowitz was the main owner. Art Davie was like president, or whatever you want to call it. But Bob Meyerowitz was the money man.
Okay.
So after that fight, man, this is
'96.
Yeah, so there's a real interesting footnote, and we've talked about this a few times. UFC 12, we had Art Davie on, and we addressed this. UFC 12 is supposed to be in New York, and I think it's either the day of weigh-ins or the day before weigh-ins. The governor of New York steps in and says, it's not happening in our state. And the UFC got a whole bunch of, like a few private airplanes, and moved the event to Dothan, Alabama.
Beautiful. So beautiful.
When did you find out about like the chaos surrounding that event and that it was going to get moved?
Yeah, Friday night, I was just so excited, man. I knew the importance of being the first UFC champion, but I didn't know the lawsuits they were fighting. Bob Meyerowitz, God bless him, man. This guy spent a lot of money. He should get a lot more credit for where this sport's at, because this guy fought his ass off to keep the sport alive. And we knew there was problems. We're in New York. I want that belt, man. That's when I won them first two tournaments, but I felt like if I win this fight, my dream will become true, that I will be the baddest man on the planet, and I will have been a world champion, you know. And so everything seemed to be going smooth. We actually did a lot of PR stuff on Friday, me and Severn. There wasn't much PR shit, but they lined up some PR stuff, me and Severn in the same room together talking, and you know, it was pretty neat. I felt like a professional athlete. You know, I really felt like a professional athlete for once. But then like say around 8 o'clock Friday night, they called a meeting down in the meeting room, and they got up there, and basically, long story short, they said, let's go, everybody get upstairs and pack your bags and get back down here. We're loading up the plane and we're flying to Alabama. And I just wanted to make sure that I would have fought Dan Severn in the fucking streets. You know what I mean? Let's just go outside and let's just handle this on the streets real quick, Dan. Film this shit, and I want that belt because I totally knew I was going to beat Dan Severn's ass. He didn't have nothing for me, and in no ways, shape, or form. And by this time, I had 3 months. I had 6-7 months of training in, and I don't think anybody could have beat me that night. But so we went up, packed the bags. We go to the airport, and sure enough, they rented 2 super jets, man, 2 huge jets, and everybody's throwing it on. Everybody's throwing their luggage on. They're loading people up. I got special treatment this time because I was the champ. They let me on the plane first, and I didn't sit first class. Now I think about it, they didn't put me in first class, but I was in the front row all by myself. And young Vitor Belfort was one of the fighters too. They let him on the plane relatively last. They didn't give him no special treatment, and he had walked by, and then I was sitting there with my girlfriend at the time, and I looked at him. I said, "Hey, you want to sit here, Vitor?" And he was pretty excited. I didn't know why, but
he was a big fan.
He was a big fan, and I had heard a lot about him, and so he sat down beside me, and we ended up talking for about however long from New York to Alabama. Me and Belfort just chatted. We chatted about life, and then so we barely made it because we didn't take off till I think like the last plane out, it's like midnight or something like that, and we were cutting it close to even being able to get out. But we got up in the air, we got off just in enough time, and then when we tried to land in Alabama, they realized that the planes were too big for that airport that they were going to land us in. So we had to land like 30, 40 miles away or 50 miles away from where we were at. And then we had to drive another hour and a half or an hour to get to the hotels. Got to bed around 5 a.m. or whatever.
Oh.
And no, man, I wasn't complaining at all. I just had my fingers crossed that they were going to be able to pull this off. You don't sleep before a fight anyways too very well. So it was all good. I just was so glad thankful Alabama let us in there, and those fans were great. The show went off great, and fuck yeah, man. I got me that belt, and I went and had me a beer that night, I'm pretty sure.
So
Hey,
wait, Miguel, real quick. So Miguel, the one thing is they actually had to fly the cage down there on one of the planes because they couldn't have transported it fast enough. Yep.
Yeah, no.
So they got the cage on there as well. And then they got it set up. They pulled it off, man. It's it pretty much this night helped save the UFC. This is a big night, and Bob Meyerowitz and the crew, they really saved the night, and they spent a lot of money doing it. I'm sure them planes weren't very cheap.
Yep. No, it was definitely, it's just for the fans out there, listen to what we're listening to here. This is 1997. So we're just in complete insanity, but I do want to take over here for a little bit because we talked about UFC 11, and that's like August of 96. And now UFC 12,
February 7th,
February of 97.
Oh,
but
wow.
Something interesting happened October of 96 that I got to take Mark to, and that's Kevin Randleman's debut at the Universal Vale Tudo in Brazil. Was that your first trip to Brazil? Did you get yourself, down there for the first time, or had you been there before? Because I know that, to me, to paint the picture for the people, Mark debuted in the UFC. He was already like a superstar, and all the Brazilian promotions wanted Mark. And I think Mark took that as an opportunity to book some guys, and we got to look at Randleman in an 8-man tournament in October. And I believe that was your first trip to Brazil as well. Talk about that experience.
Well, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure if that was my first trip to Brazil or not. I mean,
okay.
Do you know? Do you know?
I think so, because later
I took Brian Keck over there. Was Brian Keck before? Or
well, what about Maurice Smith or Eric Smith? When was Eric Smith versus Pele Landis?
Eric Smith and Randleman, that was later on down the road. But I'm just
Okay.
trying to think if I'm not sure. I don't think Randleman was my first trip there. I'm just not sure.
Okay.
Not that it's important or not, but I just feel I have a feeling I was there beforehand. It's all very fuzzy. And Maurice Smith can thank Brazil for that ass whooping he gave me.
Yeah,
Wow.
but Brian Keck was 97, so it looks like Randleman was maybe the first time down there for the Universal Valley Tudo. Brian Keck's fight against the Pedro was at the first IVC, which came up in IVC 1 Battarelli show, and that's July of 97. So that was a little bit later.
You think so?
I'm looking at a database, so they may have it wrong. I mean, I do trust.
Well, when was Randleman's fight?
96, October 96.
Okay, so it must have been my first trip there. What a fucking trip it was, I'll tell you that.
So now, obviously, Randleman won the tournament, but talk a little bit about watching him fight and now being a coach and stuff. And like, how did all that feel? How did the Brazilians receive you? Because you guys got a reputation down there fast, and they like to intimidate, people. And, I mean, it goes without saying, Mark Coleman and Kevin Randleman were not going to be intimidated. I was with you. It's not. So talk about how that relationship in Brazil started.
Was you there?
Not for this one.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely walked in there with our heads high. Me and Randleman were not scared. We just really didn't think we could be beat. I mean, we just really felt that way. We did not think we could get beat in a fight. He had a hell of a training camp because I told him I had this fight lined up, and I said, look, because he was living back in Sandusky 2 hours away. I told him because I told him that I'll get him in this fight. But he's got to move back to Columbus like immediately because he only had we'll say about 50 days, and within that 50 days, because he told me he was already in shape, but Kevin would always say that he wasn't already in shape when he came down. But the man was so special. I busted his ass for 50 days, and he the difference in 50 days was just amazing. He's a special guy, but he went in there and he was a little different than me, man, because he wasn't afraid to throw punches, because I wasn't afraid to throw them. I just didn't want to lose. I'm going to take the guy down and win with the highest percentage possible. But he was throwing punches against some guy, and I didn't understand what I was screaming for him to take him down, but he dominated two guys, and then in the finals, he had 320-pound Dan Bobish, which we weren't even, we didn't even give thought of losing. We didn't give losing a thought. And he found a way he inside tripped this big man and got him on his back, and he hit Bobish with a couple hammer fists, and that was it. And that was it. And then shit, man, we went out and we celebrated all right. We definitely celebrated. And the fans, they loved me because I beat up Don Frye, who had beaten their hero, Arme Batet. Arme Batet was in Brazil, and all the Brazil seen Frye whoop his ass. So they were so ecstatic when I paid him back that they loved me for that. But at the same time, when Kevin Randleman won that tournament, he immediately became a celebrity superstar. They loved him immediately. They loved him so much, and his body, his looks. He was a golden boy. So, shit, we got treated like the president, man. We got special treatment, and it was.
Yeah, you left Brazil wanting to go back because you went back a lot and you enjoyed it.
It was not a good thing for me to see. Yeah, it was not good for my career because I was
the country. The country wasn't good for your career.
Yeah.
Brazil was not good for my career. It was just it was too much fun, and I was weak.
There's so many things that might not be good, but an entire country I've never heard used as one of those reasons.
But he's absolutely right.
Maurice Smith can definitely he owes Brazil a big thank you for that ass whooping he put on me. I mean,
Well,
my choice, my fault, but Jesus Christ, I stayed there a little bit too long before
I got one more piece of information from 96 I wanted to ask you about, Marcus. So now you come back with Randleman. Obviously, Randleman won an 8-man tournament. You're the UFC's two-time UFC, tournament champion. And an event called Mars goes off, martial arts reality super fighting, where Rickson fought Bustamante. And you and Randleman were there. You made a presentation, actually appeared on the television pay-per-view for that show, where some manager with like slick back, chubby hair, and a little ponytail was talking for you and Kevin, and he was talking about, we will be debuting and showing you what we have here with Kevin and stuff like that. Who was that? Like, do you remember that manager? I remember the commercial from watching the pay-per-view.
Oh yeah, he was a big shot. Robert DePersia.
Okay.
Robert DePersia out in New York. He was a fast talker. He was a big shot. He represented Dan Severn at the time. He was cornering the market. He's seen a lot of dollar signs, and with Dan Severn giving me his approval, I just jumped right in on him, man. I mean, he didn't really do me wrong or anything, but he was very greedy. I mean, when I fought Dan Severn, he was both our managers, so I think he walked out with both of us or something like that. He sat out there. He was worried about the spotlight being on him. I mean, I got rid of him pretty quick.
Okay. Well, let's rewind a little bit. So Dan Severn, UFC 12, it gets moved, pretty much the day of the event. If you look at the timeline in history, Dan Severn is 14-2. You're 5-0. And if you watch the fight, right before it takes place, it's a tale of two stories. You've got Dan Severn talking with Big John McCarthy, doing like a funny train mile-an-hour question to Pittsburgh.
He was terrified.
Math equation. And then when they pan the camera across, you got Mark Coleman desperately looking for eye contact. Like he's just, no, you're going to look at me. And you could see just the two difference of just participants going into this fight and where their mindset was. What told you that he was terrified of you?
All the above that you just said. He wouldn't even look at me. He wouldn't even look at me. And he later on told me he pretty much knew that he had no chance, because he said every time he tried to figure out a way that a possible setting that he was going to beat me, and he said I couldn't come up with any way possible to even beat you. So, I mean, he told me that later. And then one time I was sitting there talking to Dan, we're doing a podcast together or something. I said, yeah, I never got a chance to really plow anybody very hard on my feet. I mean, because he said, I have to tell you otherwise, Coleman, because I didn't wear my gloves in that fight. And no. Most people thought I didn't wear them because me and Dan Severn were friends, and I kind of agreed not to hit him. Well, that was so far from the truth. It's sick. I didn't wear the gloves because it's one fight, and I was ready to break my hand on his fucking head, But I did throw one fucking haymaker right hand, and it caught him right between the eyes. I didn't realize it was hard, but he later informed me that he started, after I hit him, he said he was seeing three of me immediately. And that's when he took that ill-advised double leg shot on me, because I couldn't figure out why he shot on me. Not a smart move. And I just ran him over, and I could have ground and pounded the shit out of him, but I had been working that side Darce choke, or not Darce choke, scarf choke. I had been working that in practice, and nobody could stop it. Nobody. I was taking heads off, but to Dan's credit, I locked that thing up, and normally people would be tapping within like a second or maybe two, at the most 3 seconds, other than Wes Sims. That son of a bitch, he survived it for a good 2-3 minute war. And I couldn't believe it. And I wasn't going to let go. That's another story, but that's how I met Wes Sims. But, Dan Severn, he fought that for a good minute. And I was really thinking about letting go of it because my arms are going to be pretty tired after that. But I decided to, stick with it. And yeah, what a fucking feeling, man, hearing that son of a bitch. He's tried to poke me. He's a nice guy, but hey, man, he tried to poke me in the eyeballs when that thing was locked up. So
Hey, I'm with you. You got to try what you got to do. Whatever.
Yeah, I don't blame him at all. But no, there was no escape. There was just no escape. That's probably the strongest I ever was in my entire life. That night, I was probably the strongest I ever was, because after that, I started losing weight, because I realized I was carrying too much weight for the ideal weight. So that night I was 240, and I was slapping that choke on Randleman in the back, and people were worried I was going to take his head off. And that's what Severn said later. He said, I didn't choke him out with it. He said, I didn't choke him out with it, but he said he got to the point where he felt like his neck was going to be separated from his body, so he better tap. So
this is where things, in my opinion, with yourself and the UFC in terms of relationship, where they kind of start plotting against you. And I'm not trying to sound like a tinfoil hat guy. So let me just kind of lay out over the next few fights some of the weird things that took place where you are continuously on the receiving end of something that obviously shouldn't take place. So the first thing is, after this fight, they mentioned Art Davie comes in, they mentioned Tank Abbott, they mentioned Shamrock Frye. You said, I'll fight anybody the fans want me to. And you were just, hey, I've been doing this for a long time before the UFC even started. I've been trying to do this. So they mentioned those three names, but rather than them give you any of those opponents, they give you a championship fight against Maurice Smith, who's never fought in the UFC before. Like, out of everybody on their lineup, they've got to pick somebody else, a 500 fighter in rings, that's never fought in the UFC. Does that seem a little odd to you?
I wasn't thinking straight by this point, man. Things were starting to go to my head. I just won the belt. I started thinking about putting together Team Hammer House and building that, and obviously I had two kids, and my plate was really getting full. And hell, I was even offered a role in the movie The Gladiator. Bruce Buffer had called me up and said his buddy's, directing a movie, and he wanted to know if I wanted to fly out to California and read some lines for a movie. And as I'm talking to him, my kids are crying. I'm training Randleman, training Hinkle, training Nutter, training Wes Sims. I got to fight myself. I got to go to Brazil. Just things were I didn't think they were falling apart, but in hindsight, things were falling apart. I wasn't focusing on what got me to where I was. And Maurice Smith, when they said Maurice Smith's name, I got cocky. I was really cocky for the first time in my life. I was always confident, but this time I took it to where I was cocky. And when they said Maurice Smith, kickboxer, I just kind of rolled my eyes and said, I'm going to destroy this man. And I had no problems. It didn't matter. Like I said, it didn't matter to me who they put in there. I really felt like I could beat anybody in the world. That's how confident I was at the time. But I didn't do the things that made me a champion. I really did turn to the bottle. I started drinking, partying, celebrating, and coaching other people, and had two kids, and then flying to Brazil. And I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And Frank Shamrock had warned me. He had seen me like 2 months prior to it. We were at an event together, and he told me he's coaching Maurice Smith. And I looked at him and I said, oh, that's too bad for you, Frank. I was that cocky. He looked at me and he's like, well, hey, Coleman, he's not too bad. I mean, he's actually pretty good. I go, come on, Frank. I'm going to kick his ass. And Frank goes, I'm just telling you, as your friend, Coleman, I'm just telling you, you better train. And I said, yeah, all right, Frank. All right, Frank. And that's when I went over to Brazil with a fighter. They brought me over there. They paid for everything, and we'd stay there for a week, and we had one hell of a rodeo for the week. And then at the end of the week, I got about 5 weeks or maybe 6 weeks at the most, 5 weeks to go before I got to defend my belt against Maurice Smith. And at the end of the week, they asked me and Randleman if we wanted to stay another week. And I said, well, I got plenty of time still. So we stayed another week. And then at the end of the second week, they asked the same thing. And I still got plenty of time. I don't need much for this guy.
Oh.
I ended up staying for a month. We stayed for a month, and let's put it this way. I didn't practice jujitsu one time.
Oh.
Actually, I did one time. I went to a class just to make an appearance, and I actually got choked out by a girl, but I let her choke me out, obviously. But no, I ended up staying there for a month, and then I flew back to America because they even asked us after a month if we wanted to stay another week, and I was like, I said, well, I got to get home. I got to fight in 3 weeks, man. And Jesus Christ, man, I flew back, and then I flew out to Arizona to train with Mark Kerr, and I showed up at his door, and this son of a bitch was 260 pounds of fucking steel, Mr. Olympia looking monster. And I was like, and I had actually lost weight that whole time in Brazil because all I was doing was drinking. I wasn't even eating. So I lost weight. I was down to like 235, and I seen Kerr, and I was pissed because I'm the big man in the UFC. I'm the big man here, not you, Kerr. So hell, I immediately just went and made myself a protein shake, and we went to the gym and lifted weights, and it was like a race. Me and Mark Kerr, every time you hear me make a protein shake, he'd go out and make one, and I'd make one. You'd hear the blender going off all day long, and I ended up gaining about probably 15 pounds, 235, 245. So yeah, I was up to about 245, which I was lighter than that when I fought Severn in UFC 10, 11, and 12. I was lighter than that. They said 245, but the heaviest I was when I fought Maurice Smith, and I wasn't ripped, man, because you can't gain 15 pounds in the last 2 weeks, and a lot of it accumulated around my belly. Even I was carrying a lot of water. I was waterlogged down, and I had absolutely zero cardio, man. I mean, fuck, man. I mean, two and a half weeks of training, and Kerr was in just as bad a shape as me. I mean, I don't know what his excuse was, but we would lock up and do a little wrestling, and hell, it didn't resonate in my brain that I was out of shape. I was just that cocky and that confident that I was just going to destroy this. I was going to take him down and smash him, headbutts, ground and pound. He's going to be done in 3 minutes. That's just what I believed. And even though me and Kerr are warming up, and we're both getting tired after about a minute, my people seen me. My dad seen me. My friends see me. They see me and Kerr both breathing hard. They knew there was going to be some problems, but and the thing is, they came in. The UFC came in right before the match. It was supposed to be 15 minutes and then a 3-minute overtime, and that was it. And they came in and said if there wasn't a finish at the end of the first overtime, we're going to add a second overtime. And I looked at the UFC. I said, what in the fuck you talk about? This fight ain't going to last 3 minutes. And, my manager, the Persian, was in there. He should have fucking shut me up and said, hell no, we're not agreeing to that. But I had because that extra 3 minutes, it really turned out to be the worst 3 minutes of my fucking life, possibly. It was I didn't know if I thought I was going to die of a heart attack because I was tired. I mean, I tapped Maurice Smith out at the in between that first 3 minutes. I knocked him out with a headbutt. He told me I knocked him out with a headbutt, but he said then I hit him with another one that woke him back up, and I destroyed him for 3 minutes. If I would have had 4 in me, the fight would have been over, but I only had 3 in me, and I took my first break, and I looked Maurice Smith in the eyes, and he didn't say nothing. He started talking later on in the fight, but he didn't say nothing at this point, but I read his mind. He's like, yes, sir, Coleman, I'm still here, and we got 18 minutes to go, brother. And I have no idea. I have no idea how the fuck. I have no idea how I was still standing on my feet 21 minutes into that fight, man. I have no idea because fuck, man. You know, I mean, I only had 3 minutes in me, but somehow I survived. So it was the most humbling night of my entire life. So needed, so very needed, and just lucky I didn't get hurt.
You know, that fight was eye-opening for everybody because, like I said, before that, everybody's like, you can't beat these big wrestlers who know how to not get submitted. But then after that, I was like, okay, that's when the evolution of the sport really started to develop, you know, the mixed martial art portion. Because before it was NHB, no holds barred. It was just a fight. And this is when, like, the sport started to develop, in my opinion. You know, then you had to learn different techniques and time came into play. It wasn't like that before, but that was a fight, in my opinion, that changed it, where I said, oh, shit, this is different. You know, now I understand a little bit.
So
but nobody knew it before then.
They definitely looked at it that way, but the truth was, if I would have trained, it's over. I mean, if I would have trained, it's over. The guy would not have lasted another 30 seconds. Big John almost stopped the fight. Because it was a barrage, man. It was a 3 minute fucking barrage. And then Maurice looked at me and basically said, yeah. And then Frank Shamrock warned me, man. Frank Shamrock warned me. I was thinking about all these things the whole fight. It was as humbling as life gets.
Let's point out some of the issues in the fight. Obviously, you hit a cardio wall. That's what you say. And my thing is, at the 9 minute mark, Maurice Smith escapes from, you know, being on the bottom, and he kicks you in the face illegally as you guys were separating. So Big John McCarthy separates you guys. He puts Maurice Smith in his own corner, so where he can get advice from Frank Shamrock and get water. He puts you in a corner, but he never gives you the 5 minutes to recover from an illegal foul. He also never took a point for Maurice. He recognized there was an issue, never takes a point, allows Maurice into his own corner, and never gives you the 5 minutes to recover.
Well, you know, they didn't, for some fucking reason, they didn't. Well, I don't think they like wrestlers. You know what I mean? I don't think they wanted these wrestlers doing this. And yeah, Big John, later on, the fight that really pisses me off is when you break down the Pete Williams fight.
I'm there.
That son of a bitch cost me my fucking life almost. That fucker.
Mark,
that son of a bitch. But with Maurice Smith,
it was criminal. What took place there was criminal.
It was criminal what he did, and it almost cost me my fucking career in life, and I'm still pissed off about that, man. But
here,
Maurice
Smith,
let's
walk through it.
Honestly, Maurice Smith. When you do take a look at the kick, it was not illegal. Although John called it illegal, so yeah, because he called it illegal, I don't know what the rules were. I mean, but nowadays, yeah, you get 5 minutes. He goes to a neutral corner, but he didn't do those things. But if you do take a look at that fight, both my hands were off the feet when Maurice connected.
You know what, though? But you had a foot, a knee, and a foot down. Your hands weren't on the ground. I did it slow motion as well. It appeared to be
okay.
illegal.
Maybe you're right then. That makes me feel better. It was illegal.
Yes.
I got a little bit of details I want to add before you get to Pete Williams about the Maurice Smith fight. Just a little calendar stuff so you get an idea of what Mark is talking about, the calendar, okay? So in March of 97, he goes back to Brazil with Randleman for another set of shows where, and then in June, he's back. Now, I believe this June trip, June 15th, is when he stayed a month. He stayed in order to, until Brian Keg fought July 6th. And then towards the end of July is his fight with Maurice Smith. He was in Brazil with Brian Keg 3 weeks before the Maurice Smith fight after spending there a month. That's what it looks like. Now, in addition to that, that's UFC 13, right? UFC 14 where he fought Maurice. UFC 13, now this is odd for the time, was at the end of May. It's very close to the July show there. This is rare for the UFC, but Mark was a guest at that UFC in May.
Well, Royce Alger fought.
Yeah, where Royce Alger fought, I think. And
I got him. I got Royce in. He was my guy.
Well, no, hold on. This is the one where Couture debuted, and you were a guest. And this is a whole Tank Abbott incident afterwards with Vitor and Carlos Barreto, the fight in the.
Well, that's the night That was the night Royce Alger fought.
Okay. So
wait. Miguel, you mentioned an incident. Go ahead and say what took place.
Yeah, this is the famous incident. I'm trying to get my details here, but so the UFC would have an after fight party, and we're somewhere, I believe, in Georgia. I think this is Augusta, Georgia, and Mark is a guest of the UFC. They brought him in with the belt and everything.
I was cornering Royce Alger, bro.
And you were okay. All right. I'm gonna double check that because I thought Royce fought Ensign Inoue in Iowa.
Double check it. I was pretty fucked up, but I'm pretty sure I still got it right.
Because Royce wasn't with you at the after fight party either. You were kind of alone having a few beers, and that's the problem. Is at the after fight party,
Royce was there. Trust me, Royce was there.
Okay, I'm with you. But Tank Abbott.
So go ahead. Push this along.
Abbott. So what our Davey would do is he would gather all the fighters, put them in a line, and pay them an envelope, and that's kind of what the after fight party was. They actually had a roll-in bar from the hotel in the little room, and Tank was causing trouble. He grabbed his check, left. Tito was around. His other guys, Carl Herrera and Eddie Ruiz, were there, and they came back to the after fight party looking for trouble with the Brazilians, with Belfort. He'd eventually fight Belfort, but no, he'd lost to Belfort in the main event of that night, and so there was a fight in the after fight party. Wallid Ishmael is the guy who knocked Tank down. There were punches exchanged. Carlos Barreto was there, and Coleman. What it looked like was that Tank was sort of counting on your help in that party. You mentioned you knew him before and that he respected you, and you kind of played it alone there. I kind of remember you walking out into the middle of the Brazilians on one side, Tank and his crew on the other side, and you kind of went, "I'll fight any one of you with your arms wide open." And everybody there. And the Brazilians kind of got calmed down by Rickson Gracie, who was telling them, especially Wallid, Barreto would have been a normal guy to fight you, but I think Barreto was smart. Wallid was the dumb guy who would charge into a fight there. He's calming Wallid down, going, "Coleman's the champ. Respect the champ. Respect the champ." But there was a moment of chaos there, and you dove right into it. Why don't you tell your take on it? Because I'm sure I'm not getting all the facts right.
You were there?
Yeah.
You were there?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, you got it pretty right so far.
Okay.
So you got to understand, I was friends with everybody. I tried to be friends with everybody. So I love the Brazilians too. I love Rickson Gracie, but I was hammered, man. I mean, I was literally blacked out hammered. But and this was the night Alger fought. I'm positive because I was so depressed and so pissed when he got armbarred. It sent me into a very negative drunkenness, and so that the Brazilians are on one side, and then Tank and his boys came in, and Tank came walking right up to me, and he's bleeding out the nose, and he says, "Hey, Coleman," he goes, "I just got sucker punched by Wallid Ishmael," and I'm thinking, well, fuck, man. I look over and there's Wallid, man. This guy his eyeballs were wide open, man. They were staring Tank down, and now they're staring me down because I'm standing right beside him. And I don't know what side to pick, man. I mean, I like Rickson Gracie. I like Carlos Barreto. I don't know Wallid. I didn't dig him, but I know Vitor Belfort was there. I like him, and I'm confused. I don't know which side I'm going to take here. So I'm kind of standing right in the middle, and Carlson Gracie saying, it's the champ, get back. And then Tank looks at me and says, you're an American, Coleman. You're an American. And I'm like, yeah, I am an American. So I kind of felt obligated to jump on that ship. But then I turned back around, and there's Bob Meyer, which was right in my face. Not in my face. He was right in Tank Abbott's face. And he looked at Tank and he said, Tank, you get your ass out of here right now, or you'll never fight for this company again. And basically, Tank listened, and him and his crew left, and they left me standing there all alone. And I turned back around, and I'm looking at the Brazilians, and I said, hey, guys, what's up? I'm on your side. So I was on their side, and then you got so many people telling this story. That's what I remember. And I'm pretty sure, even though I'm pretty sure it's right, but Big John tells his version of the story. Somewhere down the line, Big John says he grabbed me and he threw me up against the wall and told me to get the hell out of here. You know, I don't remember none of that shit happening, because I don't think I would have just let him throw me up against the wall without any ramifications.
I don't remember that.
I heard that version of the story, and I was like, fuck, I don't remember nothing like that happening for sure. But anyways, it ended, and everybody lived happily ever after.
Yeah, I gotta say, at that moment, Mark, there is no doubt in my mind that you had achieved your childhood dream. You were absolutely the baddest man on the fucking planet. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
Well,
what a dream.
It's also kind of, for the people at home, you need to remember, Mark being the heavyweight champion of the world, if anybody on this planet could beat Mark up in a fight, he knew their names and where they were from. If he didn't know either of those two things, they couldn't beat him in a fight. And that's a fact. That's a fact.
I suppose.
No,
that's the way I felt anyways. That's the way, when me and Randleman were together, we had no fear. I mean, we did, but I don't think we didn't go around like bullies. I was a happy drunk, man. I was a nice drunk, happy drunk. And, I guess I was scary and didn't know it, but no, we didn't go around picking on people very often.
So let's get into the Pete Williams fight. So there's a lot of interesting twists to this fight.
Right, this is the last one. Then we're going to have to do a part 2.
Okay, this is it. Good, my man.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
So in essence, his original opponent is Yushi Kosaka. And then that's what's listed. And then in a pre-fight interview, Mark said, well, I've been training for Randy Couture, and Randy Couture fell off the card. So at this point, Randy beat Maurice Smith, and they were going to give Mark a title fight against Randy Couture, but the fight fell apart. Do you recall why either of those fights fell apart, Mark?
Yeah, I do. I was definitely having my doubts that, my first time I ever had my ass whooped, I wasn't feeling good. The whole training camp, something just wasn't right with my body, man. Something was not right. I didn't know what it was. And I started thinking I just turned into a coward, because of my loss, because I'd be at practice, I'd be wrestling, and then all of a sudden I had to take a time out, and I'd go back to my corner. And I remember looking around the room, and I was seeing clouds. I was seeing clouds in the, this is after like 2 minutes, you know what I mean? So, I'm busting my ass. Some days I'd have a good day, but then other days it would just be over, and I'd be looking, I'd seeing clouds in the sky, and I just felt dizzy. I just felt horrible. But, I had to get back in there, man. I after Maurice Smith, it took 2 weeks for my legs to turn white again. They were blacker than him for 2 weeks. And then as soon as they healed up, I went back in there with Nick Nutter. I'm back on the grind, man. I'm gonna train like I'm going for the national title again. And that's when Nutter took me down. But that's when also he drove his shoulder through my knee and blew my fucking knee out the back end. So I had to recover from the first injury I ever really had, ACL surgery. And I came back in like a little over 5 months, which is unheard of back in the day, especially to come back in a mixed martial arts sport. But I came back because I was it's like the Mike Overmyer story. It was like the Mike Overmyer story, and shit. All right.
We got
you.
you.
Good.
It ate me alive, man, that I got beat, publicly humiliated. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. I had to get back in there to get that feeling off my fucking shoulders. And I rushed it pretty good, man. I in hindsight, my leg was still probably a little, not probably, was skinnier than the other leg. The bad one, it came back, it was feeling good, but 5.5 months, maybe 6 months at the most is not a sufficient amount of time and to get yourself in shape for a fight. So it's kind of a blessing that Couture got hurt. Couture separated his ribs 2 weeks before the fight. It was kind of a blessing because I think he would have whooped my ass this night. I just wasn't myself. And he's one hell of a fighter. So we all know that. But he separated his ribs. They called me up and told me he's out. And then I just wanted anybody. Again, anybody. So they Kosaka. And then they called me back the next day. Kosaka's out. And then they went through a list of about 5 other people. And I was getting extremely frustrated because I wasn't myself, man. Something was wrong. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I thought I just turned into a coward, and I was scared, but something wasn't right. And then finally, this happened right up to like a week before. They called me back, and at least the 6th time they changed opponents on me. Then they told me Pete Williams. Who the hell's Pete Williams? I don't know who the fuck Pete Williams is. Okay, I'll fight Pete Williams. And well, I show up at the fight, and I was a wreck, man. Mentally, I was a wreck. I wasn't feeling good. I've been having night sweats all the time. I started panicking about the armbar because some people started telling me, you better go over the armbar. Pete Williams has a good armbar, and I panicked, and I went, and I literally had a guy there that was a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and I went over the armbar with him for about a fucking hour, and we were going almost full go. I was going over every option, every way to get out of the damn thing, and we got done, and everybody that was watching, nobody had enough. Nobody would say anything, but my dad was there again, and he's wondering what the hell I'm doing. I'm going hard for a freaking hour and trying to master the armbar right before I go out there and fight. And so I go back into the locker room, and I couldn't stop sweating. I was just profusely sweating, just pouring down off my face. And I was having one of them episodes again where I was just seeing things weren't fucking, I couldn't focus very good at all. And I kicked everybody out of my locker room. All my cornermen, everybody. I told everybody just to get the fuck out. I just wanted to be alone. And I'm sitting down on the toilet taking a shit. I wasn't taking a shit. I was just sitting on the toilet. And I remember sitting there, and then fucking Big John opens the door, and you can see directly from the door. You can see directly into the shitter from the door. I don't know how that happened, but he opens the door and he looks in at me, and I wasn't looking good, man. I wasn't looking good at all. Just sweats dripping off my face. He looked at me and he said, "You all right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he gave me the last fucking rules, whatever. And he left, and I walked out of that fight. Definitely my confidence wasn't there, but I had done enough to beat this guy, but it just wasn't meant to be. And after watching it in replay, I'm disgusted with the treatment I got that fucking night. I'm absolutely disgusted because
let's talk about that.
Killed.
Let's talk about that. So
what I did find out later on is because I came back home after that fight, I came back home and I was really a lost puppy, man. I was sitting out on my patio, just sitting there, probably smoking a joint or something, smoking some weed, looking up into the sky. And I was just saying, Jesus Christ, man, you just got old overnight, Coleman. You're old. I was only 32 years old. And I just thought I turned old. You know, fighters lose it that quick is what I had heard. And I thought, man, I just got old because I was feeling horrible still, man. Just depression. But no, my body just, you know, I went to the weight room and tried to lift some weights. And it's like I'd do 1 or 2 sets and it just felt horrible. And I would leave. But then finally, I started rolling around in the gym again and it just didn't have it. But then finally I went to my doctor. And he drew some blood. He drew some blood work on me. Fuck, man. I was starting to think maybe I had AIDS or something. You know what I mean? Jesus Christ. It was just horrible. My mind was just destroyed. And the doc drew blood and came back. He found out my thyroid has completely shut down. My thyroid was completely shut down, and that controls your whole body. And at the time, it was a blessing because I figured out what the hell was wrong with me. And I just had to take one pill every day. As soon as I started taking that pill, it's like my engine started back up. My motor started back up and I was back. You know, Mark Coleman was back. And, we got to go back to the Pete Williams fight. But then I moved on to the next round because I started feeling better again. And I started really training for Pedro Rizzo then.
So Mark, during the fight, at like a minute and a half, he almost hits an armbar and you wince fighting it, but you push past. Yeah. At the 10-minute mark, Big John
you go right there. I tell you what, it's lucky. It's very lucky. Although maybe it's unlucky because if he would have put me in an armbar, I would have never got punted in the face. But it's lucky. It's lucky I had went over that with the black belt for an hour because it came down. I remember him putting the armbar on me, and all of a sudden I remember my arm was getting straightened out, and I was telling myself, "Oh my God, this is going to be so embarrassing," you know, because it was over. He got it all the way straightened out, and immediately the training that I did right before the fight, I had one last attempt to bail out of it, and luckily I chose the right direction to roll. And I did roll out of it and I came up on top, but I took a big breath and said, oh man, you know, because then I'm staring at Pete Williams in the face. I'm staring nose to nose with this guy and I'm realizing I can't fucking headbutt him. You know what I mean? And I can't headbutt him. He's holding on to my arms and I can't headbutt him. And I'm just feeling weak, man. I'm just feeling so weak. And I finally get my arm free and I threw a punch. And it just felt like a sissy punch, man. There was nothing on it. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, what's going on here? But then, you know, whatever, man, I'm not a quitter. I kept battling, you know, I battled hard and yeah, I mean, the first takedown, you forgot to say the first takedown, Mike Davis, the son of a bitch grabbed onto the cage so hard that I had to fucking yank him off the cage. The big John McCarthy didn't say one fucking word to him.
Wait a minute, Mark. He did say a word. What he said was when you had Pete pressed against the fence and you were grabbing the fence for position.
That's the second one, Mike. That's the second takedown.
Hold up.
That's the second takedown, Mike.
He told you if you grab the fence again, he's taking a point.
I'm telling you, Mike, that's the second time.
Yeah.
The first time, I didn't know he was grabbing on the cage. I just thought Pete Williams was a gorilla because I hit a double leg on him. And I couldn't get this son of a bitch down. He felt like he was so fucking strong. I later reviewed the tape. The son of a bitch was holding himself up, holding onto the cage. I mean, 2 hands. And then he hit the ground. So it took a ton of energy getting that first takedown. It took a ton of energy out of me. And then he hit the armbar on me, took another ton of energy. But I fought through. You know what I mean? I didn't have no headbutts. So I'm going to struggle. I'm going to get through this fight somehow and figure out what went wrong. But then, then 10 minutes later, we're on our feet again. And then, yeah, you had that part right, Mike.
Oh. He's telling Mark, if Mark grabs the cage again, he's taking a point from Mark. Mark gets a takedown. Pete literally has his arms behind him, his fingers enmeshed in the cage. And Mark is like pulling him like a slingshot. And Pete is pulling himself back to the cage. And it's like he's playing tug of war with Pete as the rope and the cage, like stopping it. And not a single word out of Big John McCarthy.
That's a little weird.
Big John, I grabbed the cage for like a half a second and he warned me, let go of the cage. Taking a point away. Okay, no problem. But then he sat there and watched Pete Williams hold on to the cage. This is the second time. And by this time, I was drained again, man. My tank was empty. I'm just fighting on instincts here. And he fucking didn't say a word to him. I don't understand it. I want to hear John's response. I really would like to hear what John has to say about this because he fucked me.
We got to get him on here, Mike.
You know what I'm saying?
He'll have an answer for you. He'll have a fucking answer. It'll be a lie, though.
We'll play the video in there. All right. So now, obviously, that's the last fight, but Pedro Rizzo was the fight after this.
Well, then, of course, go ahead and let the fans. I'm not afraid to talk about it. Then we go into overtime, and sure enough, I'm dead, man. I felt as tired as I did against Maurice Smith, and he's over there in his corner, and they are in his face, man. Ken Shamrock, Bolander, all them guys are saying, look at him, Pete. He's dead. And I was dead. And then he came over and he threw a knee. It hit me on the chin a little bit, but I remember they say when you shake it off, that means he really got you. I don't know if that's true because I shook it off because it didn't hurt. You know, he did hit me, but it didn't hurt. But that's all I remember. Because after that,
that was a clean knee. Like that knee, I replayed it slow motion. It was clean. But what wasn't clean prior to the head kick knockout, he kept throwing jabs with open fingers at your eye. Like it was repeated. It was intentional. Got the reaction he wanted, and then throws a head kick.
I'm going to have to watch that because that just pisses me off even more now.
Okay. So now I got two questions.
Shot with that knee. I took a pretty good shot.
You know, it was kind of grazing, but it was legal. Like I thought it was illegal.
No, I didn't say it wasn't legal. It just didn't hurt.
It didn't look like it hurt.
That's all I remember because then right after that was Jesus Christ, man. When I seen it on tape for the first time, and then they used that to open up the show for 10 years, man. That was a highlight reel for 10 years, man.
Well, there was also Hall of Fame fight. I would like to file a grievance with the state in regards to getting that overturned, getting your hand raised posthumously, of course. But after this, it's a real controversial fight with Pedro Rizzo, where Mark loses a split decision, where he did not lose that fight. So we're going to get into that next time when we talk about Japan. But prior to that, just a couple more questions. At the peak of your career in the UFC, Rickson Gracie said that you were no match for him because you were not strong enough. I never heard you respond to that.
Well, I mean, that's just him playing his role. I mean, he knows better. I've heard other people say that Rickson Gracie, when asked about me, I've heard other stories where Rickson Gracie said he didn't know what he didn't know how he would handle me. And so who knows what to believe. Probably that time he had his kayfabe on, his pro wrestling look on. So he's got to say that. But I've heard other stories where he had no idea what he would actually do with me in there.
So how do you think the fight between you two would have won?
I'm a different person now, man. I'm a changed man, and that don't bother me in the least.
How do you think a fight between the two of you would have went?
Well, I tell you what, man. I probably would have stayed on my feet with the guy and fought him like I did Akira Soji. I would have stayed on my feet, and I would have fucking probably knocked him out on my feet. And if we did go to the ground, hey, I'm not that guy is. hey, he is 400-0 for a reason. He's the legitimately only 400-0 guy, and nobody denies that. He's a badass, slick fucking Brazilian black belt, and I'm sure I would have went over it for a long time. I would not have stepped in there and fought him without going over everything for a long time. I wouldn't have been that stupid, but with headbutts, I just would have been too big, too strong, too powerful. But hey, there's always a chance that he could have got slick and got into something, man, because he's a bad dude. I got nothing but respect for Rickson Gracie.
That's cool. All right, last question, and then we'll get out of here. You and Ken Shamrock had closed door sessions with each other. The rumor was that you knocked him out in practice. Is that true?
Yeah. Didn't knock him out, but I put him on Queer Street. It was the third round. He wasn't going to ground with me. I don't know why. And then all of a sudden it was spar time, and I hadn't really done a ton of sparring up to this point. I was just coming off the Pete Williams loss, and I was a mess. Mentally, I was a freaking mess. So I actually went down to hang out with him, and I don't know. I just was open for suggestions at this time, you know, and so he decided he's going to spar me, and you know, the first two rounds were, you know, it was fun. You know what I mean? I was a lot better than I thought on my feet. So relatively, I don't remember him hitting me hard ever. I don't know if I got him or not, but then the third round, towards the end of the third round, things were starting to really pick up, and I threw a 1-2-3, man, a jab, uppercut, and left hook, and I plowed him, man. I mean, I literally hit him real hard, and I couldn't believe he didn't go down. You know, I was pretty impressed that he didn't go down, but I did knock him back into the wall, and then the buzzer rang. And I was walking around in between rounds, getting ready for round 4. I was excited about round 4 because my confidence was going through the roof. And then we started round 4, but his coach, the coach decided we're not going to go live round 4. We're going to do a drill. You know, I kick him, he checks it, and then 1-2's back. He kicks me, check it, 1-2 back. Whatever it was, the drill. But I found Shamrock, he couldn't follow the instructions. He wasn't there. You know, I mean, I was telling him what the drill was, and you know, this is not my specialty. You know what I mean? So I was like, no, Dan, it's right here, and we're doing it. And we did that for like I don't know, we did that for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden Ken stopped and he looked at me. He said, goes, "Hey, did you hit me?" And I said, "Well, what are you talking about? Did I hit you?" He goes, "Did you hit me or something?" I go, "Fuck yeah. About 3 minutes ago, I plowed you 3 times." And I said, "You didn't go down or nothing." He goes, "Oh man." He goes, "I don't remember nothing about it." You know, so that's, I don't have to fucking lie on my stories. There's rumors out there that Jerry Bolander claims that it wasn't even competitive. Me and his sparring session wasn't even competitive, and this and that. No, the truth is I fucked him up. And if you tell the truth, it ain't fucking, there ain't nothing wrong with it. And that's how the story went down. And that's exactly how it went down.
Okay, so we have concluded Mark's UFC career, and part 2 is going to concentrate on Japan. Mark, love you, brother. Thank you for your time.
Hey, I came back, baby. I came back to the UFC. You didn't conclude shit.
Well, that was the beginning, Mark. That was the beginning. We got Japan, then UFC.
First. Oh, no, Mike. I want to start with the Rizzo fight. That's where we didn't get deep enough. I actually sat next to one of the judges for that one.
Oh, which one?
I sat next to Meltzer. I remember Meltzer. I remember he gave Rizzo the first round. I remember looking at go and saying to myself, "Wow, that's fucked. Like that's fucked." but that's for next time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Miguel. Keep going.
Well, no. I think the controversy to me is this: Meltzer was there. There were a couple of incidents that UFC that were interesting.
Well, what was Eddie Goldman's problem? Me and Eddie Goldman were supposed to be friends. What the hell was he watching? His glasses were like they're like 3 inches thick, Did he have the wrong pair on or something?
Well, I'll tell you. I think if I'm not mistaken, this was the guy who was starting to be a matchmaker now. Even though Art Davey was still around for a couple of UFCs contractually, these matches are Peretti's doing, I think. And I think Peretti, as much as Coleman likes you, as much as Eddie Goldman likes you, I think that Goldman put Peretti on a pedestal like that, and it may have been chatter from Peretti because I think Peretti really liked to catch the wrestlers with submissions. You look at Kenny Monday's story, you look at Kevin Jackson's story and stuff like that. I think the wrestlers were top of the game at a certain point, and Peretti's attitude as a matchmaker was like, we can undo that. So I think that may have been the influence on Eddie. The problem with Meltzer is that Meltzer's a pro wrestling guy. He had no business being there.
No, man, but yeah, you're right about Peretti. He did not like us wrestlers at all. He did not like us at all. And fuck Eddie Goldman for selling out like that. Fuck. Like I said, I watched that fight and there's no way in hell I lost. There just isn't. Eddie Goldman, you sold out. Meltzer was an ignorant fucking. He just is ignorant, as in ignorant means he just didn't have the knowledge. He didn't have any knowledge at all. And the other guy got it right. Although I was fighting that night not to lose because I'm coming off 2 losses and I wasn't fighting to destroy somebody. I was fighting not to lose. So everything happens for a reason. And, good things came after my departure.
Absolutely. Mark, love you, brother. Can't wait to see you next week, man. I'm coming to your stomping grounds, and we're probably going to do a number on Wes Sims together. Both of us.
Gonna have to. He needs it. I'm back. He's back to being the secretary, and I'm back to being the GM.
You need to be his manager again, even though you guys are past fighting. You guys need to be his manager.
All right, guys.
Love you, Mark.
Thank you so much. Thanks for catching up.
Too.
Well, Mike, we promised an in-depth interview with Mark Coleman, and I can't say we didn't deliver. I think we got it. Thank you to Mark, man. God.
So when we get him back, we're going to talk Pride. And then when we get him back again, I think obviously we're going to close out his UFC career. But I've also shot him a message about doing a straight Kevin Randleman episode where we do a deep dive with him, and he's game. He doesn't give a lot of interviews because he just doesn't like doing it. And he gave us a ton of time. I mean, almost 3 hours. So any surprises on your end, Miguel?
Yeah. No, well, first of all, he stated in the interview that he's 6 months sober. So, I feel very good about that. I think that, if he's done other interviews before, that this is probably his first sober interview, right? I think he's done a couple of appearances and things. So maybe not, but I don't think anybody else got him for 3 hours, talking about the good old days of going to Brazil and when he was UFC champion and stuff. And you can see, like a fighter, those are his glory days, and Mark lights up with that stuff. So we got good stuff from him, very personal stuff.
Well, this is what I like. Richard Hamilton was in the witness protection program that from the FBI, and a convicted child sex predator that has a Dan Severn tie. So, I mean, that well keeps getting deeper, which is, I don't see that shortening up or shoring up anytime soon, to be honest with you. That was fascinating, as well as the way the UFC was tilting the table against him. Like if he were in the corner of somebody else, they would have had a very loud voice as an advocate, to where Mark was his only advocate at the time, and he was in the fight, so he wasn't seeing what was going on around him. But he really got fired up about Big John, and he should have. Like, Big John does have some questions, to answer, particularly in the Pete Williams fight.
Yeah, I thought it was funny too when we went over the extracurricular activities after UFC 13, where Coleman and Tank took on, the Belfort team, and he said he brought it up again. He brought up John McCarthy again. He said, John McCarthy tells that story. A lot of people tell that story. One thing John McCarthy says that I don't remember happening was he says he put me up against the wall and controlled me, and I don't think I would have let that stand. So yeah, I think John McCarthy definitely got under the Hammer's skin, man.
There's something there. And then, all right. So I was at a fork in the road. Do we talk about Rickson, Shamrock? And there's obviously there's a John Jones story that we're going to get to in a minute. I picked the Rickson and Shamrock one because they're just such legendary things that haven't been talked about that need to be addressed. So
Well,
I go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we went over 2.5 hours with Mark this time, and he said, I'm gonna go, we'll get back, and I'm confident he's gonna come back.
Oh yeah.
And I think we're gonna get another 2.5 hours out of him. I mean, I was sitting there, I was like, we're looking at a 6-hour interview because
Listen,
we only covered 2 years, man.
Miguel, I got 16 questions that are not even fight related. I started with one with his fight at the county fair, which doesn't bother him, but he didn't lose. I got the Mike Overman story out. I've got a dozen other questions that are not fight related that will take us hours to get through. And it's the only reason I know is because Mark is 6 months sober. Before he got sober, I was doing sales in Ohio, and I drive around with him in my car.
Yeah, man. I was with him at a lot of the shows back in the 90s too, so I know him from those days. So I think we got a real personal interview. And one of the things that's funny to me, and I'm going to say this as we close here, with respect to Overmyer, because his original opponent was throwing his name around, and he is deceased now. But in this interview,
that's a bad boy.
Mike Overmyer is the only person that Mark Coleman will give credit to actually taking him down. And there was something, but he took me down. That's
true.
And if you look back at our library of interviews, we got Nick Nutter claiming a takedown, and Mark Coleman took it away from him in this interview. So, Nick, you got something to pay attention to there.
That's true. That's true. Miguel, that's very true. Hey, guys, December 17th, 115 Bourbon Street in the Chicagoland area. Ignite FC is doing an MMA event. I do the color commentary for them. Please stop by Chicagoland area. I know we've got, a few listeners from that area. Please stop in and say hello. That's my only plug, Miguel.
And, in terms of plugging here, I'm going to plug the Lights Out podcast. Like, subscribe, do comments, all that stuff. Share it with friends and stuff. I mean, we're trying over here to deliver stuff that you don't get anywhere else on the internet. And I think that that goes without saying at this point. I don't think there are interview podcasts in MMA that are this fun and this close to the guys. So enjoy, and we'll keep pumping them out. And thank you very much. And thank you to Mark Coleman for giving us gold.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.